See you in an hour down at City Hall. Bye. All of the partners. It's about so much more, and it's about. And against the world surrounds king.
Yo, what up? Videos and pictures from our event yesterday. I was just looking at some of them. Hmm. That's crazy. Yo, Bronx. Yeah, this shit crazy right here. So the dude, I think a couple people do this. Like take a picture and then take the picture back to the actual location so it kind of fits into the background. Got fucking Ice Cube, but the picture he matches it. He goes to the exact location, and you can see how the background like merges into the edge of the picture. Yeah, it's crazy to find all these places. The basketball court with Will Smith from the intro to Fresh Prince. He took the screen and actually went there. So that's Philly, obviously. Got the I think there was like a 15 or 16-year-old Biggie Smalls rapping outside a grocery store. So he went there to Bed-Stuy, took that fucking picture at the exact location where that shit happened, yo. There's another Biggie on the corner, the exact corner where that picture was taken. That's pretty dope, you know, just to travel around. Like, yo, I've been to that spot where Tupac spat at the camera. It was right here, bro. I was right there, yo. Still right in that same fucking spot. Old picture of Nas. That's pretty dope. I wish I had enough energy and time and money just to travel around and go to like locations like that from random screenshots and pictures. All right. So yeah, still working on this commission for D1, and oh yeah, it's fucking doing that thing with the weather outside again. Oh shit. You know that funny thing with the weather where like shit comes out the sky? It's doing that again. Like we didn't get enough of it already, but it's like, oh fuck you and your warmth because nature, nigga, nature. You know what nature says? Nature says you need more snow. More and more snow. So yeah, this should be fun. Psych. Carrying the waters in the house, don't fucking fall. It's so stupid. It's too cold for this shit. And I'm so over all this goddamn snow. The snow is getting fucking ridiculous. Ooh, thank you. Thank you. Babe. Get some Tabasco sauce. I'm sorry. All right. So this isn't breakfast in bed, but it's breakfast in the studio, which is almost as good as breakfast in bed. Mm-hmm. Probably won't need that again.
About buffering issues anywhere, anytime, instantly. Internet providers don't want you to know about this.
You're the best, babe.
Chris Hurst and Matthew Anderson are two computer engineers. They found a way to boost Wi-Fi signals instantly.
They both worked for a...
Let me ask you a couple questions. You think judicial activism, Doctor, has hurt blacks. Judicial activism of eliminating restrictive covenants in deeds, eliminating segregation in schools, one man, one vote, literacy test. Do you consider those judicially active?
Well, as regards restrictive covenants, I can see no evidence that they did anything other than make some people feel good because it was symbolic. As regards desegregation of the school system, that should have been done long before, on a much more sound basis. I've gone into this at great length in previous writings.
But are they?
You see, the problem is not whether you believe that school desegregation should have ended. I believe it should have ended long before. George Bork believes it should have ended long before. What he and what I have objected to are the principles used in that decision, because those principles take on a life of their own, and they come back to haunt you in other areas. Obviously, this old phrase, the hard cases make bad law, derived from that fact. You dream up a principle to reach this result, and then the principle has a life of its own.
So the principle of desegregating the school...
No, that wasn't the principle. The principle was the reason that they picked for it. Was
well, that's all I'm saying. Okay, the reasons they picked
yes.
of desegregating the schools, you and Judge Bork agree were the wrong principles, and they should have not. So the court shouldn't have done that.
No, the court should have done it.
Oh, okay.
Both of us have said the court should have done it.
I see.
And in my case, and I think in his case, the court should have done it a lot sooner.
How?
They should have ruled that it wasn't equal protection of the law, because nobody in his right mind believes that there was equal protection of the law in the Jim Crow era of these school systems.
I'm just trying to figure out what you're saying.
Yes.
Now, when they desegregated the D.C. schools, it's clear the 14th Amendment does not apply. Everyone agrees that the 14th Amendment does not apply to the District of Columbia. How would they have done it in the District of Columbia? Should they have just let it stand in the District of Columbia? Segregation?
No, in fact, Senator, it's interesting that you say that, because I've gotten the first thing I ever wrote on a public issue was in November 13, 1950, in the Washington Star, in which I argued for the desegregation of the DC school system.
I got some waffles. I got some chicken.
I had not studied
got some eggs with some peppers in it.
Later. And so I hadn't worked it out. Nor do I
chicken, waffles, eggs, and peppers
in front of a large group of lawyers at this very moment in the time it's available.
Well, how about literacy test? Was it judicial?
I see no reason why people shouldn't be literate in order to vote. The question is, if you have a black who comes in with his degree from Harvard, and the man behind the desk says, no, you're not literate, you can't vote, then this is what bothers me. People are talking about how judges should be sensitive to this particular group or that particular group. And if that means anything, if it means he's applying the law differently, that's precisely how blacks were held down for generations in the South.
So
by applying the law differently.
So literacy test as long as they were equally applied, are all right.
Sure.
So I thought you thought. Now, I also want to clarify, I gather from your comments about MIT and Harvard that you don't think there's enough blacks out there who are qualified to fill the number of vacancies allotted for them in those schools. Is that right? Is that what you're
Well,
saying?
the word qualified is really misleading.
Well,
The question is whether or not they are like the other students at Harvard and MIT.
Well, okay. So there's not...
So they may be perfectly qualified. This same student might go through, God help us, I hope there's nobody here from Illinois, Illinois Institute of Technology and do well. But there's no reason why he should fail at him.
So what kind of breakfast meats do you eat? If you don't eat chicken for breakfast, will you eat pork for breakfast? You ain't never go to McDonald's and have a chicken biscuit for breakfast? You ain't never had a chicken patty for breakfast? Nobody never gave you a grilled chicken croissant for breakfast? No? Man said he ain't never ate chicken for breakfast. He said I don't eat nothing but beef, sausage, and pork bacon for breakfast. That's all I eat. Beef, sausage, and pork bacon. I never had chicken for breakfast. I can't even fathom the idea of somebody eating chicken for breakfast. That's crazy, bro. Hey, man. So, I can't hate on you because you don't like chicken for breakfast. See, this was my dinner last night. I had chicken for dinner, but it was some leftover chicken. So I might as well start my day out eating some of my leftover dinner. So that shit is delicious. And since I'm eating my leftover chicken, that means I didn't have to cook any beef sausage or pork bacon. Nice and simple. Get that hot sauce on there. You gotta get a lot of hot sauce on it though. Give it the flavor. Hot sauce on my burrito, baby. Hot sauce on my burrito, baby. Gotta get them eggs. Eggs got them good calories and protein in it. Chicken got a lot of good protein in it too. That's one time. Try that shit one time, bro. I mean, you do like chicken. You said you eat chicken. You just said you eat chicken for lunch and dinner. So it's not like you don't like chicken. You just don't like chicken early in the morning. But if you try that shit, man, just wake up one morning and be like, yo, I think I have some fried chicken. It should change your life, bro. You'll feel like a whole grown-ass man early in the morning. You know? You see everybody else eating some donuts and coffee for breakfast, and you roll up with some chicken and waffles and eggs, you feel like a grown-ass alpha male. Look at your puny-ass meal. What is that? Donuts? Ha 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 ha. Look what's on my plate. Yard bird. You gotta have that yard bird for breakfast. Protein. Beer. It is too early for beer. I'll be asleep in a little while. I can't go to sleep there. I just got up. All right. I guess I'm good. Oh, steak and eggs for breakfast? Hell yeah. I had that the other day. I always eat my dinner for breakfast, man. I had steak for dinner, and I did eat all my steak. So in the morning, I just heat my steak up and cook some eggs with that shit, man. Steak and eggs for breakfast. Put a little piece of toast on the side with some butter. Have your little cup of hot tea. Can't go wrong. Steak and eggs for breakfast. You can't go wrong with chicken and waffles either. You know what I'm saying? If you can eat steak for breakfast, you can eat a goddamn piece of chicken for breakfast. I said, I only like red meat. I only like red meat before 9 o'clock. I bet you do. Like that red meat. You got an uncle or a cousin who do that? Be trying to get food out their teeth? I'm like, damn, bro, why don't you just go floss that shit, man? Floss. I got it. Oh, you want a piece of floss, man? You just can just get up in there and get that shit out. Nah. I got it. I don't need no floss. You need something, nigga. It sound like you got squirrels running around in your mouth. All right. So my breakfast was delicious. You know what I'm saying? I had a king size manly breakfast this morning. That shit made me feel 100%. I feel like I can conquer some shit right now, like a dictator. You know what I'm saying? Start just giving out orders and shit. You fetch a la mush. Oh, said Raucous Records. Who was signed to Raucous Records back in the day? I think Talib Kweli. Wasn't Black Star signed to Raucous Records? Got that cranberry grape juice. I don't know about that shit. Electrolytes and antioxidants.
There's no prestige in flunking out of the Ivy League.
I got it. So, but my point is, you believe there are not enough black women and men out there that are the same as white women and men to be able to go through Harvard and MIT.
If there were, it would mean that the whole history of oppression had done no harm whatever.
Well, so the answer is you don't think there are. I just want to figure out what you're saying.
That's what I think is a factual matter.
So factually, you're saying factually there are not enough.
Factually, this study's already been done by Klitgard at Harvard, and the figures are all there. Anyone can look them up.
Okay, no, I just want to hear from you. I want to know what you're thinking. Have you read all of Judge Bork's cases or any of them? Have you read all of his writings?
I haven't read all of them, but I've been reading them for more than 20 years because I used to teach antitrust economics.
Right. Now, are you part of what they call the law and economics school? You know that. Would you consider yourself part of that school? There's nothing wrong with that. It's not a bad school. I just want to know where you are.
When I sit down to write, Senator, I don't ask what my label. I don't check my identification tag to see what I am. But I did. One of my books did win a prize as the best book in law and economics in 1980.
Yeah, no, but I mean, there's almost a term of art out there called the School of Law and Economics. Yes. And are you part of that school intellectually? That's all I'm trying to get.
You the landlord? Yes, you. Why aren't you the landlord? Every day you go to and from work.
If the election goes to Biden, there's a good chance that the Democrats will then control all the two branches of Congress and the White House. And considering the kinds of things that they're proposing, that could well be the point of no return for this country.
We should stop rewarding wealth and start rewarding work a little bit. Let's raise the capital gains tax for people making over $1 million a year to ordinary income. Let's reverse the Trump tax cut.
Those of the left often act as if human beings are just like inert blocks of wood, or like chess pieces that you can move around on the chessboard and put wherever you want to carry out some grand design. But of course, people react to these things. In the early 90s, the tax rate on top income was 73%. And people making over $100,000 paid something like 30% of all taxes. By the end of the decade, the tax rate on the top had been cut to 24%. People making over $100,000 now pay 65% of all taxes. And the reason is quite simple, that when you have a tax rate of 73%, people simply don't pay it. They put their money into tax-exempt securities and arrange their financial affairs. So what we're really talking about is, do you want a symbolic high tax rate on to win votes politically, which the rich themselves are not going to pay? Or do you really want more tax revenue coming into the government?
So to gun owners out there who say, well, a Biden administration means they're going to come for my guns.
Bingo. You're right if you have an assault weapon. The fact of the matter is they should be illegal, period. 150 million people have been killed since 2007 when Bernie voted to exempt the gun manufacturers from liability. More than all the wars, including Vietnam, from that point on. Carnage on our street, and I want to tell you, if I'm elected and I'm coming for you and gun manufacturers, I'm going to take you on and I'm going to beat you. I'm the only one who's done it.
Obviously, right now, I'm sure you're well aware, the gun debate going on in the country, and you've weighed in on this before. At what point do you say, okay, here is a clear-cut case where, correlation to causation here. We can look at this graph and determine it. One to me that stands out, we've been talking about this quite a bit with the gun debate, 98% of public mass shootings occur in gun-free zones. Seems to me that's pretty cut and dry, one that's never talked about. In your opinion, when does it cross that barrier where, okay, we can definitively say this is the reason?
Well, I think for gun control people, it will never cross that barrier because they will never discuss it in those terms. When did you ever see any gun control advocate come up with numbers that show that gun control reduces murders? There's a huge volume of evidence out there. Think of it. There are 50 states, each having all kinds of different gun laws. There are all kinds of ways they can be compared. Think of all the countries around the world with different gun laws, different periods of history when there were different gun laws. And so you have a mountain of evidence if you were looking for evidence. Instead, they just simply assume from day one that if you have tighter gun laws, you'll have less murder rates. And there's tons of empirical evidence pointing just in the opposite direction.
I almost single-handedly made sure that Robert Bork did not get on the court because he did not think there should be enumerated rights.
This may be the most important Supreme Court nomination of our time, not simply because Judge Bork is the most highly qualified nominee of this generation, but because this is an historic crossroads as regards the expanding power of judges, which is to say, the erosion of people's rights to govern themselves democratically.
Why did you testify there, and what impact did the rejection of Robert Bork have on the arrest?
57, 58, 59, 60. That's 4 minutes.
I can do 5.
Okay, sweetie, I really have to get ready for my meeting.
To the judiciary over the years.
Oh my, I testified because of the gross distortions that were coming out. I was listening to the congressional hearings during the day, and I'd hear how Bork was, at the very least, racially insensitive or actually opposed to civil rights and so forth. And then I would go to the Stanford Law Library and check out Judge Bork's record and his record before he became a judge. And I discovered in those files amicus curiae papers filed by Judge Bork repeatedly on the side of black civil rights organizations. I learned that no civil rights advocate had ever lost a case in Judge Bork's court. And I was already familiar with Bork's record before I even looked into the law, because I was teaching economics, and I often read things that he wrote about antitrust law, which were brilliant things. And so an enormously intelligent man, an enormously decent man, and all sorts of other filth was brought up. One being, for example, that he worked for big corporations, you see, because money was more important to him. And Bork was an academic, which is not a big bucks enterprise to get rich quick, and a government official, of which the same could be said. And at the particular time he went to work at a high salary in business, his wife was dying of cancer, and he wanted to have the money to make her last days as comfortable as he possibly could. And for that to be turned into some kind of cheap political charge was just truly despicable. More than that, the difference of one man on a Supreme Court that's divided is enormous. And every time I read an opinion by Justice Anthony Kennedy that is wishy-washy and incoherent in some cases, I think that's the price of defeating Judge Bork.
If you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, and you ain't black.
It don't have nothing to do with Trump. It has to do with the fact I want something for my community. I would love to see
Take
you.
a look at my record, man. I extended the voting rights 25 years. I have a record that is second to none. The NAACP has endorsed me every time I've run. I mean, come on. Take a look at the record.
If I'm president, Betsy DeVos's whole notion from charter school.
Record, man. I extended the voting rights 25 years. I have a...
Did you hear that? He did what? What did he do?
My community. I would love to see
Take
you.
a look at my record, man. I extended the voting rights 25 years. I have a record that is...
He extended the Voting Rights Act for 25 years. You know why? Because it's not a permanent law that black people have the right to vote. It's an act that has to get ratified every so often. And for a time, I think it was every 15 years, Congress had to go back and vote on the Voting Rights Act of 65 to see if they still want that in place and allow African Americans to have the privilege to vote. And he's saying, oh, well, we voted to extend it for 25 years instead of 15. So now, well, you know, for a fact, for the next 25 years, you're going to have the right to vote. And then what happens after that? When those 25 years are up and Congress has to go for this vote again, are they going to ratify and renew it? And that's what a lot of black people don't understand, yo. Like, your right to vote can get taken away from you, literally and legally. I never heard him say that shit. I gotta
in big trouble.
Record that is second to none.
My community. I would love to see.
If you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, and you ain't black.
It don't have nothing to do with Trump. It has to do with the fact I want something for my community. I would love to see
Take
you.
a look at my record, man. I extended the voting rights 25 years. I have a record that is second to none. The NAACP has endorsed me every time I've run. I mean, come on. Take a look at the record.
If I'm president, Betsy DeVos's whole notion from charter schools to this are gone.
No privately funded charter school would receive, or private charter school receive a penny of federal money. None.
One of the classic examples to me of few.
It has to do with the fact I want something for my community. I would love to see
Take
you.
a look at my record, man. I extended the voting rights 25 years. I have a record that is second to
It is so hard to kill this glare, yo. I swear it is. I be trying though. I'm trying to kill the glare.
things that are going very well in the ghettos across the country, and that's some of the charter schools that have come in, where the public schools, the kids are just wiped out. I mean, the kids in those ghetto schools often are 2 or 3 years behind the national norms and all kinds of stuff. But in some of these ghetto schools, especially those run by the KIPP organization or by the Success...
These charter schools.
I'm sorry, charter schools in the ghetto.
Right.
Their kids are scoring at levels equal to, and in some cases better than, that in affluent suburbs, where the kids come from families making $200 grand a year. And you would think, my God, this is something that ought to get a lot of attention. The welfare state supporters are fighting against charter schools. The NAACP is fighting against charter schools. The teachers' unions give a lot of money to politicians. They give money to the NAACP. They want control of the schools because the schools are a source of jobs. Whether or not the kids learn anything is not their concern. I think the most cynical thing you can find in American politics are those.
Hey, so this is an extremely high-tech $5,000 handheld telescope. It was developed so that military observation teams could do recon missions, view enemy
people who are making themselves big champions of blacks, and yet who are fighting against it. One school, kind of schools, that are offering a way out of poverty for millions of black kids.
Thomas, when I had you on right before the election, I asked you what you thought Trump versus Hillary, and you said, well, Hillary is a known disaster, Trump is a risk, you'll take the risk. How do you feel about Trump versus Biden?
Not that different, except I think Biden is a bigger risk than Hillary was.
Because?
Because, first of all, he's not as smart, and I think that the way things are poised, if he comes in and the Democrats take the Senate, I don't see anything getting better in this generation. I also believe that even though the country has weathered many bad things in the past, there is a point of no return. And I suspect that that's where we're going to be taken to. When I see people talking seriously about abolishing the police force, my gosh, I mean, insanity. And of course, the biggest losers, if they do that, would be the low-income minority communities, where you already have these rising rates of murder as the police withdraw. And the police themselves, when they realize that there are politicians who will throw them to the wolves rather than confront loudmouths, they pull back. Mm-hmm. They're not going to go out there and risk their lives needlessly, knowing that the politicians will turn against them if there's any problem.
What do you think will happen in November?
Oh, politics is very tough to predict. Mm-hmm. I'm told that at one point there was someone who had a 19-point lead at this time.
Yeah, I think Dukakis did. I think at one point.
That's right. Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah. They saw by luck Dukakis for what he was, a phony. Mm-hmm. And I think that if they see Biden for what he is, not only a phony but an incompetent one, then of course all of this could turn around. But there's so much hanging on this that if that doesn't happen, we are going to be in big trouble. It means that the Democrats will be able to appoint the next whatever number of Supreme Court justices turn up during their term. They have so many counterproductive policies out there that I'm not sure the country can recover from.
A strain of bacteria called Lactobacillus reuteri that will help you grow bigger balls. There was a study published in 2014 that used male Wistar rats. These rats have extremely similar reproductive systems as human men. This is why they're commonly used for studies in the reproductive system. In this study, the researcher found that when fed Lactobacillus reuteri, the group of rats actually outperformed the control group on many different biomarkers. And these biomarkers included preventing age-related ball shrinkage, significantly increased ball size when compared to the control group, significantly increased ball weight when compared to the control group, significantly increased T levels when compared to the control group, increased social domination when compared to the control group, increased activity of the HPA axis,
Welcome to Uncommon Knowledge. I'm Peter Robinson.
Be sure to follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/UNC Knowledge. That's twitter.com/UNC Knowledge. Dr. Thomas Sowell has taught economics, intellectual history, and social policy at such institutions as Cornell, UCLA, and Amherst. The author of more than a dozen books, Dr. Sowell is now a senior fellow at the Hoover Institution. His newest work, Intellectuals and Society. Tom, we'll begin with a quotation. Then candidate Barack Obama in July 2008, quote, "It's like these guys, Republicans, take pride in being ignorant. They should go talk to some experts and actually make a difference," close quote.
Well, talking to experts does make a difference. Many of the great disasters of our time have been committed by experts. You may remember FDR's brain trust, which according to later studies prolonged the Depression by several years. The whiz kids in the Pentagon under McNamara, who managed to mess up the Vietnam War. You can run through an impressive list of things, of disasters brought about by people with very high IQs.
All right. Segment 1, the species of the intellectual. When you refer to intellectuals in Intellectuals in Society, whom do you mean?
I mean people whose end products are ideas. There are other people with great intelligence whose end products are things like the Salk vaccine.
A research scientist is not necessarily an intellectual.
That's right.
An engineer isn't necessarily an intellectual.
That's right. Because the engineer is judged by the end product, which is not simply ideas. If he builds a building that collapses, it doesn't matter how brilliant his idea was, he's ruined. Conversely, if an intellectual who's brilliant has an idea for rearranging society, and that ends in disaster, he pays no price at all.
I see. Let me quote Intellectuals in Society, quote, "The fatal misstep of intellectuals is assuming that superior ability within a particular realm can be generalized to superior wisdom or morality overall. Chess grandmasters, musical prodigies, and others who are as remarkable within their respective specialties as intellectuals within theirs seldom make that mistake." Explain that. Why would it? Well, let's take an example. Noam Chomsky, whom you write about in Intellectuals in Society, whose work in linguistics, in the first place, I can't understand it, but as best I can tell, everyone who understands his technical work within the field, within his discipline of linguistics, considers him one of the great figures of the 20th century. And his work in politics?
Absurdity. The same could be said of Bertrand Russell and his landmark works on mathematics and other people in other fields, but they step outside their field. And when you step outside your level of specialty, sometimes that's like stepping off a cliff.
And why is it that intellectuals, that is to say people whose end product is ideas, should succumb to that temptation more than, to use your example, a chess grandmaster?
Because a chess grandmaster can be world famous for doing absolutely nothing more than winning chess tournaments and making displays, as many of them do, of playing 5 chess games simultaneously while blindfolded.
So Bobby Fischer had no need to opine on the politics of the day because he was getting rich and famous and making a brilliant career for himself within his narrow profession.
That's right.
But intellectuals, what? They languish in obscurity. No matter how.
My bad, guys. I was posting on Facebook some shit. I'm just
someone well known or not. Came up.
What we're listening to right now. I never see. I've been understood the Voting Rights Act. It's an act. That's it. It's not a law. It's not a mandate. It's an act is some weird ass shit, yo. And so with the civil rights movement, they were able to acquire the Voting Rights Act of 64-65. And an act has to be ratified every however many years they said it. I think in the beginning, it was like every 10 or 15 years, Congress had to vote on the Voting Rights Act to see if they're still going to keep it in place. Do you understand what that means? Like, you don't have the permanent right to vote as a black person. You don't. You don't. They can strip that shit the fuck away from you if they so choose to. That's why it's an act. And so I didn't realize Biden said that shit. He was like, yeah, so I extended the Voting Rights Act for 25 years. So what? You made it longer to the next time you and your cronies voted to extend the period until the next vote. Okay, so instead of, trying to ratify the act every 15 years, now you're saying, oh, we extended it 25 years, which means still in 25 years, you're going to have to vote to see if you want to keep it in place or not. And so technically, there could, in the next 25 years, white America who are 15 years old right now, they're going to be in Congress and they're going to be set to vote on the ratification of the Voting Rights Act of 65. Are they going to pass it or not? You never know. In 25 years, culture and everything can fucking change in this country. That's a whole generation. And a whole generation may look at that shit fucking different. So from generation to generation to generation, they get to decide if we're still going to let you vote or not. But a lot of people don't really rock the vote. Go out and vote. Vote Biden, Obama. Oh, niggas always voting Democrat. Y'all don't even know, like, whatever, yo. You know what I'm saying? Has these Democrats ever set up somebody campaign to say, let's do away with the Voting Rights Act and just make it a permanent thing that black people get to vote? Let's see if we can do something about reparations, like real hardcore shit. Like, you'll never see any politician fucking set their campaign based on some real shit, yo. Because they know there are certain things that aren't going to fucking change that would really help black people. And that's why they won't ever give you a real, like, a full black president. And that's why they stuck you with Obama, who can, who can appeal to both sides of the fence. And everybody expected him to appeal to both sides of the fence. Well, I really think black people expected him to do more, but then realize, like, oh, he's not. Because you can't let me be no damn president of this goddamn country. Oh, because we about to get reparations. And that Voting Rights Act shit, that shit about to go out the goddamn window. We don't need that no more. Everybody get to vote. If you're a U.S. citizen, you can read and understand what the fuck is going on, and sometimes I just like, people don't understand this shit, yo. And it's just so fucking weird to me, yo. That's why I don't really play the fucking voting game. Like I say, man, if they get a candidate who really gonna change some hardcore shit, you can get my vote, man. But until then, y'all keep playing all these little pity-pat games, all this talking all these niceties and all this shit without ever really doing shit, man. I'm so tired of that shit, yo. I'm done. I'm good on that shit. Y'all can go out there and pander to whoever y'all want and tell all these lies to all these people dead in their face. I ain't gonna allow you to lie to me, man. That's what I'm saying. All these motherfuckers vote for Biden. Like, what the fuck is he gonna do, bro? Y'all vote for Biden just because y'all hate Trump. That's the weirdest thing. Like, I just don't understand that. I don't like Trump like that either, but he was definitely a better lead man than fucking Biden. I can't trust none of these career politicians, man. These motherfuckers been at that shit. They say 30, 40, damn near 50 years this motherfucker been at that shit. You a career politician. I can't trust shit you say. You just you don't even know you be lying no more. You done lied so much over your political career. It's just like you don't even know you be lying. It just sound like the truth so much, man. Fuck that. What? To each stay on. If you damn, that snow really coming down. Oh my God, yeah. To each stay on. If you wanna stay stuck in the system and believe in the lies and shit, hey, more power to you. More power to you. Sunday, Sunday, Sunday.
Today, but we got David also in California. How are you, David? You're on with Dennis and Matt.
Well, hi guys. I'm a little nervous about coming on after those two calls.
Just don't try to tell us what we think. Yeah, I'll let Dennis. I'll let Dennis steer for a while.
Either one, it doesn't matter. Look, the reason I'm calling.
It says here you were calling to talk about the true intention of the Gospels, who wrote them, blah blah blah.
Yes. Because I got to tell you that my research has showed that most of the modern scholarship that has been done on the historical Jesus is wrong. And there's a whole different picture that actually exists of Jesus if you understand what the Gospels are all about.
I think you and I are going to find a lot of disagreement here fairly quickly. Quite possible. But I hope that's not the case, because I have friends who are mythicists, and mythicists, for me, fall into a couple different categories. There are the ones who are far more conspiracy-minded, where their scholarship's questionable, where they start talking about how Christianity was invented in the 4th century by the Pope and the Masons. And then there's others who are properly skeptical, who say, hey, we just don't have the sufficient evidence to conclude that this person actually existed, or that we have a good record of what they did or didn't do. Right. And I'm fine with that.
Okay, but if I explain to you that the Gospels are not what you've been taught, that they are actually political propaganda, and that the parables reflect that political movement, and that there are other things outside of the New Testament and all the other, supposed proofs that Jesus existed.
It sounds like we're getting. It sounds like we're getting dangerously close to like Caesar's Messiah level conspiracy theorist crap.
Well, it's historical. I don't know if that's crap or not, but it's historical, and I can tell you pretty much who wrote at least Mark and Luke Gospels, and I have a pretty good idea that the same person wrote the Joseph and Asenath treatise. That would have been done by Philo of Alexandria.
Yeah, I've been down this road before, David. It's not relevant to the show. I have no interest in it, and we're going to argue back and forth where you're convinced that you've figured out the great mystery of who wrote it, and you're not going to convince me.
Okay, why is that?
Because I've studied this stuff, and the other people who are also experts in this have failed to convince me. And one of the things is because we're looking at a historical record. I tell you what, when was the Gospel of Mark written?
Very early.
Okay.
Very early. It would have been written. Parts of it would have been written just after 24 CE.
Okay, I would have dated it slightly later than that, actually.
No, these are very early. They're propaganda, and propaganda is only useful during the lifetime of its subject or the movement.
Here's the problem. Your date for Mark does not match up with even the other mythicists that I've talked with.
I know. I know.
During the President's Day savings event at Raymore Flanagan, you'll find everything you need to achieve the perfect.
And so
Believe me, I'm not moved by that at all. I mean, I've listened to Richard Carrier and some of the other mythicists, and they don't understand. They take the Gospels at face value. And when you understand that Philo probably was involved in writing Mark and Luke, you understand that there's deep levels of allegory.
And when you understand that the lizard reptilians are secretly controlling the government.
No. Has anybody ever explained to you the fact that the Gospels are written the same way that Philo wrote his stuff? They're basically Jewish writings written in Greek with Latin titles. And Mark and Luke are Latin names. They're not Hebrew names. They're Latin names. Mark is from Marcus, for the god of war, and Luke is for Lucifer, the bringer of light.
Yeah, so here's the thing. You should get a hold of Carrier or Fitzgerald and see if they want to have a discussion about that. But this isn't what this show is.
Oh, okay. Well, I thought if it kind of basically went against or showed up the fact that mythicism isn't really based on a non-existent Jesus, that there was a historical Jesus and that people knew about him and wrote about him, that would be important. But apparently not.
You are so far out from all scholarship that what you need to do is do the work and present it such that it becomes and is addressed by experts. You don't need to be calling in to an atheist show where neither one of us have any expertise in the subject of dating these or comparing the originals, which you don't have anyway. There's nothing that can be resolved here other than you're talking about something that to even some of the farthest out there mythicists is going to be disregarded and dismissed. And so there's nothing we can do on this show that's going to be good for any of us.
Okay. I've seen your show where you had somebody on, I can't remember his name, and he was very, very much in touch with the historical Jesus, and this caller called in. I have tried getting in touch with well-known scholars, people that are archaeologists and professors of, biblical studies, and they have the same attitude. It's like, oh, it's too far out. It's too much of a stretch.
Yeah, so do the homework and get it published and show them that you're right. That's the way this stuff's supposed to work.
Except that, and Richard Carrier is aware of this, they don't listen. They don't want to admit.
Well, tough. That doesn't mean you call into some random show that has no expertise and no dog in this fight.
As I said, I've listened to your show before, and there was an expert on there. Sorry that, you guys are not familiar with that view. Don't want to waste any more.
I am familiar with this point of view, which is why I'm not interested in talking about it. Thanks. It's for those who didn't understand a lot of what went on in that conversation. I know I touched on the fact that there's different categories of mythicists. Yeah. The whole thing is there are a group of people who are convinced that Jesus never existed as a historical figure. I'm on record of saying I'm not really bothered about whether he did or not. It's true that if Jesus never existed as an historical figure, Christianity fails, like right before you.
Well, out of the gate, yeah.
The problem is there's no way to demonstrate this. When you're talking about looking back at history, the best you can come up with is kind of inferences and suspicions, and it's like, well, this was written around this time and seems similar to this, which is exactly where it went. Oh, if you're familiar with the way Philo wrote, you'll see his handmarks on here. Well, there's also the possibility that somebody familiar with Philo was doing that there was a style that was being emulated. There's also this notion that Paul points out that there were books being run around forged in his name. It's even written there on one of the books that most scholars think was actually forged in his name, because that's what you would do. If I wanted to send a letter to the ACA from Dennis Loubet, I would compose a letter as if I were Dennis and put, you can tell that this is really me because it's actually coming from my email address, and then I would find somebody who could spoof your email address and send it that way. That's exactly what somebody do. Now, how do you tell the difference? The problem is we don't have access to originals. We don't have access to the eyewitnesses. We don't have access to historical documents of that time that would confirm it. And here's the thing.
Nothing contemporary.
Oh, I just said here's the thing after somebody pointed out that was my thing to say was here's the thing. If you look at all this, the fact that there's any question at all about whether or not Jesus was a historical figure
Doesn't matter whether you go way out into the conspiracy theorist weeds or you're still within the realm of modern scholarship. The fact that God has not cleared this up is a damning enough problem for Christianity. The fact that this is an issue that isn't the most solid fact of all of history is already damning to Christianity. Because if you're God and you come down to earth at a time when there's no way to record this, where most people are illiterate, where proper scientific testing and skepticism and critical thinking are still far in the future of what we're doing. We're at the very beginning. We haven't even reached like Enlightenment era stuff.
No,
certainly nothing about it. And you decide this is the exact perfect point in time for me to come down and sacrifice myself to serve as a loophole for the rules that I'm in charge of. And this should be good enough evidence for everybody. You're a dipshit, because that is exactly the wrong time to do it.
Yeah, it's like you should ask God, have you met people?
Yeah.
I mean,
It's frustrating because, oh, God is all knowing and all wonderful, all this stuff, and he's going to do this. Yet pick your religion. This God is not ever telling us anything that is,
it is really
incredibly
really
novel to the people who are there.
Yeah, it's all through intermediaries, and it's all
no joke. Oh my God.
Yeah, there's the people who always talk about how how this scientific discovery and that scientific discovery was predicted in the Bible or the Quran or all this other stuff, and you go, then why didn't those people discover that and use it, and they had a huge head start? Why didn't they figure it out?
The time that it became actual knowledge is when we tested it and
Is when
confirmed
it
it.
became actual knowledge.
Not when somebody revealed a vague message that only in hindsight were you able to suspect was about that. Plus, this is all a bit like, hey, I've got a God, but he goes to a different school and you don't know him. That's the way this communication's going.
There was a character in, was it South Park? Captain Hindsight? Who would show up at a burning building and fly in with his cape, and everybody would look up to him and he'd go, well, you should have had this, you should have had fire extinguishers in the upper stories, and you should have done this, and you should have done that. And they go, thank you, Captain.
Should have turned that stove off before you left the house.
Thank you, Captain Hindsight. Yeah.
Behind America's student loan crisis, predatory lender Navient. Families are struggling, while Navient.
All right, so we've got RJ in Denver. You're on with Seth and Matt. How are you?
Hi. I think I've talked to you before a few weeks ago. I don't know if you remember me or not.
Down. I take a lot of calls, so I don't want to say I do before I do.
All right. Well, I know you've got the notes there, but basically, once again, this isn't 100% proof, but I think it definitely supports the idea of Judeo-Christianity over evolution.
I have a question, though.
The ancient...
You say it's not 100% proof. Allow me to be kind of pedantic for a second in order to throw off the people who are watching this video and in chat who are going to be pedantic. Proof, for me, is a mathematical thing. Instead, when we're talking about epistemology, about how we know what we know, we don't have proof. That's math. What we have is evidence, and whether or not the evidence is sufficient to reach a
Y'all
conclusion.
got to see this shit right here. Man.
So it's not like you have to have 100% proof. What you have to have is evidence that's sufficient to reach a conclusion. And so is the evidence that you're going to be presenting sufficient to conclude that a God exists?
Let's say it definitely proves that atheism or evolution doesn't exist. Because if you look at Can I just say that I believe before we get into this philosophical argument? I just want to hear how you refute it.
I mean, you've already. I don't want to be a dick. I'm going to let you say what you think. But you've already started off just about as awfully as you possibly could. You suggest that you have evidence for God, and then when I ask you about it, what you then say is that you think that it shows that evolution or atheism can't be correct. Well, atheism isn't a positive statement, and evolution isn't in any way necessarily excluding a God, and evolution, by means of natural selection, is the scientific cornerstone of the explanation for the diversity of life. Are you saying that you don't believe that evolution is real?
I don't. No, I don't believe in evolution.
He just invoked Francis Collins, right, who actually is a Christian. Ken Miller is an intelligent design guy who's also a credible biologist. You've got the Catholic Church, who it took them until the 1980s, but they finally embraced the fact of evolution, this idea that first of all, you've linked God belief and the science of evolution together.
Which is a mistake.
A lot of believers actually hold to evolution.
So prove evolution is false and undermine all of science. Go ahead.
Well, okay. The ancient civilizations, I think you would all agree, the oldest civilization is Sumeria that we know of, correct? Ancient Sumeria?
I don't know, but I'll go ahead. I don't know how that. I don't see. Here's the thing.
It's one of the oldest on record. I'll give him that.
I've been doing this a long time, and this is not the way that an argument is constructed. Like, genuinely, it's not like you're anywhere near a premise yet, other than to suggest, like, which ancient civilization is the oldest is irrelevant to whether or not there's a God. But go ahead.
Okay, so I know a lot of evolutionists believe that humans started in Africa, right?
Can we just call them scientists? Can we just call them scientists and not evolutionists? Because we're talking about actual scientists who are actual experts who spent their entire life doing this, and you want to evolutionists. But go ahead.
Sure. I mean, if you want to refer to them as that's. I mean, I don't.
I prefer to refer to them as realists attached to reality who aren't denying scientific facts, but you can call them whatever you want.
And I don't know that believe is necessarily the word that we find useful here. It is that it has been traced. Humankind's lineage, we've traced it back to Africa. It's not that they just woke up and said, I'm going to believe this. They actually dug into it, and they began to reverse engineer the genome and began to look at civilizations and humankind. And
do you think DNA is real?
Wait. Some of them believe Australia, though. So do you believe Australia is where they
first I've heard
or do you believe Africa?
Australia.
So can we just stop, RJ? Because it doesn't matter. The fact that we don't know where life originated, the fact that scientists have a number of different speculations about that ultimate answer, doesn't mean that what we know about science is wrong. Do you believe that DNA is real? Because I had a caller today that didn't, so I want to check that.
Yeah, I heard that. Yeah, and DNA is very, very complicated. It's a code. It's basically a codex. I mean, you used to be a coder, correct? Weren't you a coder for video games at one point?
A code. It is analogous to a code, but it's not a code. It's not like somebody picked these out and constructed that. But you at least believe the DNA is real, then?
Well, yeah, it's a code. I mean, like when it exists without it, it's a code.
It is not. You saying it's a code is a dishonest way to address it. It is analogous to a code. It can appear to be a code. But when somebody like you wants to use the word code with it, you're suggesting that this means that it was designed and implemented by an agency with an intent and purpose. And that's not how it applies with science to a DNA as a code.
I think I'm getting off track here with the DNA. I just wanted to go into this, and I know you're probably going to disagree with it, but I just wanted to go into the civilization part of it and finish my thought on that.
Yes,
if you don't mind.
Distracting.
Okay. Okay, so the ancient civilizations, you have Sumeria, the one that we know, the one that's on record. right? That's right smack dab in the Middle East, where a lot of the religious, I should say, or Christianity theologians, not all of them, but some of them believe that that's where the Tower of Babylon was at. And it's very close. I mean, if you look back at the Noah, where he landed in Mount.
I think you mean Tower of Babel, not Tower of Babylon.
Tower of Babel, but it became it's a Tower of Babel, but then Babylon eventually came from that same section, but that was at a later time. That's why they actually referred to it as Babylon, but anyways, that was later. You're right. You're correct. But the Tower of Babel, correct. So all those civilizations, if you look at Greece, Egypt, and Samaria, they're all right there in the Middle East. They're not in Africa. They're not in Australia.
Okay, stop. RJ, stop. The oldest civilization, okay, that's what we're talking about, right? The oldest civilization, right?
No, oldest known civilization, I should say, yeah.
Oldest known civilization, but the key word there is civilization. Where you're not citing where did life begin, you're citing where did civilization, where did recorded history begin. Life predates recorded history. And when scientists say that life, our common ancestors for humans, seems to begin in Africa or in the vicinity, saying that's where civilization began. The beginning of the existence of humans is not the same thing as the beginning of the existence of civilization.
I understand that. So, wouldn't the probability be more that it would, if life began in Africa, that civilization would have started roughly like in that area versus the Middle East, if that was correct?
So first of all, RJ, have you looked at a globe ever in your life? Do you think that the Earth is round or flat?
Yes.
Okay, so have you...
Are you going to insult me? Because yes, of course I think it's round.
I'm going to insult you. You're sitting here suggesting that biological science isn't real, and you think I'm insulting you?
Never said that biological science wasn't real. When did I say that?
You don't accept evolution, and you're pointing to the oldest civilization that you can reference and trying to argue as if that has any bearing on where life began or the origin of human beings began. And by the way, the Middle East and Africa, not that far away. And if you were to go to like 23andMe or do some genetic research, the haplotype there would show how our best understanding of human origins begin in a part of Africa, and then how your ancestors in particular migrated. In my case, it went directly through the Middle East and then up to Europe. But the beginning of humans is not the same as the beginning of civilization. And yes, if humans began in Africa, it's not surprising that we would see civilization in the Middle East.
Okay. And another thing is the population, and I talked about this last time. Population, the highest population is in Asia, in the continent of Asia. It's not in the continent of Africa or Australia.
So
would imply that
oh my God.
Human life.
All right, I'm going to mute. I'm going to put you on mute, RJ. Where the largest population is today, bearing on where human life originated. Well, be saying that because New York has way more people, that clearly the first colonists landed right at New York and just built that there. If you're going to make the claim, what I know is, do you have evidence? And it says here that you have evidence for a high probability that Judeo-Christianity, which by the way isn't a fucking thing, Judeo-Christianity, not a real fucking thing. There's Judaism, there's Christianity, and the only time that Judeo-Christian, go ask a Jew if there's Judeo-Christian. That's only used when they want to side together against somebody else. The origin that you're talking about, do you actually have evidence for it? Not, hey, look at the oldest civilization, or look where the population is. That flies in the face of my personal confused interpretation of what science has to say about the origins of biological diversity.
Yeah, I heard a beeping noise. Am I on the line?
I'm waiting for you to answer.
Okay. I would say that the fact that the Sumerian language is the oldest written language, I would say that in the Middle East, makes the probability very high that life began or started in the Middle East.
Well, you're wrong.
I mean,
Well, you are demonstrably wrong. That is your personal suspicion, which isn't supported by evidence or understanding, and flies in the face of what science has seen. The reason you have that as the oldest written language and the oldest known civilization, that's because language goes along with what we define as civilized, but it doesn't go along with what we define as the origin of humans.
What about the early Sumerian religions that were not Christianity? That's what I'm wondering. All right, let's say if we followed your premise to its logical conclusion, what about the non-Christian religions, sort of heathen practices, these non-Jesus, non-Yahweh religious practices linked to the Sumerians? That would make your Judeo-Christianity bogus and false. Jesus would have been false.
I knew you were going to bring that up.
Well, I mean, I'm just curious. How would you respond if we follow your premise to its natural origin and we say, fine, everything's rooted in ancient Sumeria, the religions of that time and geographic region then be the accurate ones, plural, and not Judeo-Christianity, which came thousands of years later?
When Noah landed in Mount Ararat, which was north, it's kind of northern Syria, right?
Hands are up.
If you follow, now I'm not saying, I know you don't believe in the Bible, but if you follow the actual stories.
RJ, you're now muted, and you're muted because my co-host said that he's done with you.
I mean, I
asked you about the logical conclusion of your argument, and what you came back was when Noah landed on Mount Ararat. First of all, you have no evidence that Noah existed or created a boat or that there was a global flood or that he landed on Mount Ararat or that anybody...
He just invoked like the most easily refuted story, arguably, in the Christian Bible.
But is that surprising? Somebody who wants to, who thinks somebody's sitting there, armchair, deciding, confused about the difference between the origin of life, the origin of humanity, and the origin of civilization, thinking that he has evidence for a God, and then when faced with the logic that exposes that, well, of course we're going to go to Noah. RJ, you're not going to convince us by citing Bible stories. You need to come with evidence.
Am I still in line, or did you? I didn't hear the.
I was waiting for you to say goodbye.
I have one more thing. On this.
No, I was waiting for you to say goodbye.
Oh, okay. So
So goodbye.
All right, I produced a video years ago. It's called Noah's Ark, God, Giraffes, and Genocide. And it, in about 4 minutes, just dissects the Noah story. Now, this is a digression from his original question. But he brings up Noah. And like, of all of the stories, like some of the shit in the Bible, we can be like, well, did it happen? Did that region do this or that? Well, maybe. And then somebody sort of bastardized it and did something else with it and molded it and magicked it and did all those things. Magicked? That's not even a word. And
I'm with that's a word.
Noah's Ark. And so anyway, you can look that up on YouTube. But he said something else, and it brought up something I wanted to toss out. He mentioned the Tower of Babel. I produced, I think it was earlier this year, a short-form audio vignette podcast. It's called The Tower That Reaches the Heavens. And it got into the story of the Tower of Babel, right? Prideful humankind built the tower because they wanted to become God, essentially. They were reaching up into the heavens, and so they, using these primitive materials, primitive techniques, built this tower, and God got so pissed off that he punished the people by splintering them into languages that could not be understood, and then they all flew out. And so that's supposed to explain the various languages of planet Earth. But I was thinking to myself, story makes no sense. When he brought it up, I wanted to jump into that because I think the tallest buildings of the modern day so eclipse anything that the Tower of Babel might have ever been. If you go to Dubai, or if you go to Kuala Lumpur, if you go to, hell, you look at One World Tower, and you look at the sheer height and girth and monumental amazingness of these structures, far eclipse anything that angered God in the Old Testament whenever the people were building Babel, and yet we've heard not one peep, not one syllable of protest from Yahweh over our hugely taller and more magnificent man-made structures in the 20th and 21st centuries. I just thought that was interesting.
So you and I are going to disagree.
Oh, shit. What'd I say?
Just a little bit, because I've also done a video about the Tower of Babel, and I would have agreed with you and thought, and it would agree with everything you said for the entirety of my time as a Christian, even having read it, until I actually read it and focused on it. Because the truth about the Tower of Babel story, and it's only 9 verses. I mean, it's Genesis 11, the first 9 verses, I think. And if you read it, actually, let me pull it up. Let me go to BibleGate.
You don't have to read it to me. I'll take it on faith. I mean, I believe it's true. You know, you don't have to.
So Genesis 11.
I'm being corrected on live television.
No, it's not corrected.
Well, if I'm wrong about the context or the text itself, I definitely want to know. So tell me where you're at.
At no point does it suggest that they were trying to build a tower to reach heaven or to reach God. At no point does it say God was in any way concerned or mad about the tower or concerned that it could reach heaven, which would be preposterous anyway. What it says is, in verse 1, now the whole earth used the same language and the same words. Cool. We know that's bullshit already. So this whole story is done from the beginning. We know enough about linguistics to know that that's not the case. But verse 2, it came about as they journeyed east that they found a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there. Okay. Then they said to one another, come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly. And they used bricks for stone, and they used tar for mortar. Now, first of all, we're talking about a brick construction, so I'm sure we'll get engineers letting us know what can be done.
What height and girth you could support, sure.
And they said, come, let us build a city, build for ourselves a city and a tower whose top will reach into heaven, and let us make it for ourselves a name. Otherwise, we will be scattered abroad across the face of the whole earth. And then we get to the crux of this. In verse 5, it says, the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the sons of men had built. The Lord said, behold, they are one people, and they all have the same language. And this is what they begin to do. And now nothing which they purpose to do will be impossible for them. Let's go down there and confuse their language so that they will not be able to understand one another's speech. In verses 5, 6, and 7, God comes down and says, hang on, these people are working together. They are communicating, they are working together, they want to stay together as a community, and if they keep doing this, there is nothing that they will be unable to accomplish. That is a direct paraphrase. And this is what they begin to do, and now nothing which they purpose to do will be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and confound their language so that they will not understand one another's speech. So the Lord scattered them abroad over the face of the whole earth, and they stopped building the city. Therefore it was named Babel, because the Lord confused the language. But the truth of the matter is, that story is about a group of people who were advocating for communication, cooperation, and principles of humanism. And God came down and said, if this shit keeps going, they're going to be able to do anything, and we can't have that.
But you just validated my position that it caused him great chagrin, which is why he confused the people and scattered them to the wind.
Right, not because they were going to build a tower to heaven, though, but because,
because
they were cooperating and they would have no more need of God.
I'll buy that. I mean, I should have been clearer. I think I see the two tight. It's a cooperative endeavor, but you're right. It was more about the attitudes of the people and the idea that they could produce these amazing results without divine intervention. God was not pleased.
But can you imagine what would happen if they were building a spaceship?
We have breached the end of the solar system, and yet Yahweh has not lifted he's not shown up and said, hey, wait a minute. This kind of cooperation ain't working for me. The International Space Station, talk about global cooperation. Yahweh has not once said, hey, hang on, you can't do that. Like,
hey, Google Translate, motherfucker.
So what I want.
Although, honestly, Richard, you just told me a story that suggests that shoes are.
Oh my God, that's right. Yeah.
Special ed art and no education. Oh, special ed means special education. So you can't have special education and no education. It cancels each other out. So that doesn't make any sense at all, bro. But since you're in special ed, you probably need to read some of these books right here. You ever read that book before? Probably not, because you're probably not educated enough to read on this level. You know? You're probably not educated enough to read on that level. So, have you ever read these books? No? Someone would probably have to specially educate you before you're able to read and understand any of this stuff. You know? Can you read that book right there? Can you read that title to me? No? Because you have no education. You probably can't read that book either. I know you definitely can't read those books over there. You probably can't even read what's written on that door, you know? Without the proper education, you're going to miss out on all of this. All of this good art and education. You're going to miss out on it. But hey, if you want to be a dummy all your life,
Not yet had the displeasure of dealing with J. Warner Wallace, but for those of you who aren't familiar with him, he's the genius who goes around talking about ancient history and New Testament textual criticism, using his experience as a former detective. It's about as much sense as Bart Ehrman and Richard Carrier using their scholarly experience to infiltrate the mob, and gets results of the same quality. While Wallace is most famous for his pretense at biblical scholarship, most people don't realize there are many other things his police experience didn't make him good at. As we'll see today, one of them is understanding anything about morality.
Now, I've worked a lot of gangsters over the years, and I've recognized that they have a code of their own. Their own code.
That seems like redundant phrasing, but fine. They had a code of their own code.
I worked with one guy who tortured a gang rival because that gang rival had made an unwanted advance on his sister. Didn't even touch her, just said something to her.
The words "that gang rival had made an unwanted advance on his sister" can mean very different things. Work on clear pronoun reference?
So they captured that poor guy and tortured him to death. Was that right?
No, it was not.
They thought it was right because they had their own code. It was grounded in that individual, agreed upon by his gang member friends.
Yeah, I think we all see where he's going here. Basically, if a gang has a code saying you should torture someone just for saying, "Hey, how you doing?" to a guy's sister, or his own sister, but I think it was the other guy's. Personally disagree with him, but we have no basis for saying our anti-torture sensibilities are better than his pro-torture sensibilities. Because, you know, morality is grounded in him or some dumb phrasing like that. So if your personal thoughts on torture are just grounded in you, it's all just personal opinion. And the only solution, the only basis for a universal standard of morality, is a set of rules that are grounded in God. Yeah, been there, done that. So let's move it along.
But is that, I want you to consider the moral hierarchy we all live in. He, for example, has his own moral hierarchy. Jesse believed that he had his own personal beliefs, his own code.
Okay, not to keep being a dick about phrasing, but isn't the sentence, "he believed he had his own beliefs," true by virtue of his own grammatical structure? Oh, I don't know. Anyway,
The gang to whom he belonged had their own decrees. But in California, Los Angeles, for example, you have to follow the municipal codes. That's one level above. These things dictate onto Jesse. These things dictate onto his gang.
Stop and consider for a moment that he said municipal codes dictate onto Jesse's gang. What does this mean? And what is it that they dictate? Define or even influence the moral code by which the gang is run? The gang, almost by definition, won't give a flying f*** about and will, in as many ways as possible, ignore the government's laws. Kind of what gangs do, right? Yes, there's a core truth here in the fact that municipal laws impact how the gang operates, insofar as the local government has the will and ability to curtail its activities. It impacts the gang in a way that hopefully reflects and promotes moral values, but it's actually a dynamic of force, not morality. In many situations, think Al Capone in the 1920s, for example, it can be reversed with a gang by various degrees strong-arming or even practically running the government. This chart, despite its misleading label, is not about any kind of moral hierarchy, power dynamics, and the various reach and level of different kinds of authority. The most minimal consideration will reveal how grossly he oversimplifies what's really a multitude of interconnected social, political, and organizational issues.
Not only that, there are penal codes in California that dictate onto Los Angeles, and there are federal laws that dictate onto California. And the United Nations would like us to believe, at least, that there are certain decrees that dictate onto the United States.
It's funny how he has to pause and take this little jab at the United Nations. I guess know your audience, right? Really quite telling, and undermines his entire point, how this remark implies that lower levels of his hierarchy can question the legitimacy of higher levels. I mean, if we individual people down here can use our own judgment to assess when and under what circumstances an entity up here should be asserting authority over us, there's something other than the hierarchy of this chart that helps us determine when something is and is not moral? Morality grounded in the will of an authority at all? Are there other considerations by which we actually judge whether these authorities are behaving morally? If we can judge how legitimate and moral some of these authorities are, might we also judge the one we know he's going to put at the top, namely God? This is one of the many times that Wallace gets dangerously close to articulating real insights into how morality works. Well, there, bud, you're stepping on your own toes.
My question for you is there yet another transcendent layer of moral responsibility? If there is, what could this be? I actually think there is a code up here.
As we've already started to see, this whole idea of morality being defined by layers of authority is oversimplified if not entirely wrong. Because remember, municipal codes don't dictate the morality of the gang, and as Mr. Warner Wallace's little chuckle seems to hint, the UN sure doesn't dictate his morality. But why would we need a layer above them in a model that we're already questioning and that appears to be about a lot of dynamics other than morality? I contend that morality is totally divorced from this hierarchy, and we only see each layer of authority as legitimate if it reinforces values we understand to be moral for reasons we've internalized and understand ourselves, at least on some level. Operations have nothing to do with any level of this chart and won't be better informed or supported by adding another level to this chart. All of the moral scenarios Wallace goes through undermine his own idea of authority once you break them down. Go right ahead and do that.
I'll show you what I mean. If Jesse thinks he's going to go out and buy a car tomorrow, he might choose a crazy car. He might choose a red Yugo. I don't know. He likes red. But you know what? That's his personal choice. It works for him, but may not work for anybody else. But it's his choice. He can actually justify that moral decision.
Ooh, did you catch that? Justify his moral decision. Why do you need to justify a moral decision if it's grounded in the dictates of an authority figure? Wallace, like most people, has a deeply internalized but probably poorly understood recognition that there are practical issues of obligation, safety, and social order that help determine whether we see an action as moral. Fortunately for him, he has a way of letting this slip into his commentary. As this Yugo example unfolds, keep in mind that Jesse has to justify his decision to buy the car. Think of how it's justified. In other words, what factors go into determining whether the color car he gets can become a moral issue rather than a matter of mere preference.
His gang, though, could say, no, Jesse, we don't drive those kinds of cars. That'll be spotted in a heartbeat. We drive cars that blend in. And this is what we drive. We park those cars wherever we want. So if you're going to be part of our gang, you have to have that kind of car. That works for us. It may not work for anybody else, but it works for us. Therefore, they are sufficient to establish that moral code.
Remember earlier when I teased about Wallace's pronoun reference with the sister thing? Silly, of course, but here's where pronoun reference actually becomes important. When Wallace says they are sufficient to establish that moral code, he's not totally clear what they is referring to. The gang member sufficient to establish a moral code? Or are the justifications sufficient to establish the code? I'm not sure which Wallace meant, but let's think about what might actually turn Jesse's choice of a car into a moral issue. See, there's nothing inherently moral or immoral about choosing a certain color of car, right? And if anybody, be it a gang or the city or the federal government or the UN, simply decreed driving a red car was wrong, we wouldn't suddenly see the choice as immoral. On the contrary, we would immediately recognize the declaration was an overreach into matters of personal preference, which shows us that the authorities do not define morality. Even if God himself said that owning a red car was wrong, they'd want to fall in line, but something about the decree wouldn't sit right with them. And as they do with many parts of the Bible, they would feel compelled to come up with a plausible reason for it. The actual problem is that by buying such an absurdly conspicuous car, Jesse would be putting his gang members at risk of exposure, either to the law or, presumably, rival gangs. The question here is not, is it moral to own a red Yugo? Is it moral to recklessly endanger others? And the car would simply be the means by which Jesse was endangering his gang. So by trying to show us how a group can simply decide that something as arbitrary as the choice of a car is immoral, Wallace accidentally gives us an illustration to the contrary, which is that to delve into the question of whether an act is moral or immoral, you don't go up a chain of authorities to decide what the higher level said is right or wrong. Into the consequences of the action and decide whether it causes unjustified harm or disruptions. Of course, we have the underlying problem that we're talking about, a gang, and the fact that their organization brazenly disregards the good of society opens up a whole other can of worms. Still get the moral principles behind what you might call honor amongst thieves. And when we evaluate the quality and limitations of these thuggish morals, and ultimately think about what's wrong with them as a gang, we do so by looking at how they do or don't harm other people, possibly taking into account the surrounding socioeconomic circumstances under which the gang developed and operates. Nothing, absolutely nothing to do with decrees.
But you can't park your car anywhere you want in Los Angeles. We got laws. I don't care if you are a gangster and think you're somebody. You can only park in certain areas. If you want to live in LA, you got to bend your knee to that. That's true for all Angelinos. May not be true for other cities, but there are places you can't park. That means that Los Angeles is sufficient for those kinds of laws.
Nope, same idea. Los Angeles is not sufficient for those laws any more than the gang is sufficient for prohibiting a red car. This don't even make sense, because there's no such thing as having sufficient authority to make something moral. Sufficient reason. And the reason for the parking laws is to avoid the chaos of people parking wherever they want, which would end up inconveniencing and ultimately harming members of the public. That, not dictates, is what might make a parking law moral or immoral. Are LA's parking regulations different from those in other cities? It's not because of the will of each city government, but because of the unique needs of the area. And I guess also other complex social and historical issues, but you get the idea. Doesn't use Los Angeles' parking laws because it doesn't have the same needs. And if Los Angeles and, say, Akiachak, Alaska tried swapping parking laws, it would be a disaster and the people wouldn't have it, because they recognize that the decrees are only valuable if they serve the public's need for safety, order, and fairness. So, if the city of Los Angeles cannot justify a law, the will of the city government itself is not sufficient reason to create or enforce a law.
But you know what? If you park your car on the street, you better have a tag on it from your registration, because in California, without that, you're going to get a ticket. It may not be true for all states, but it's true for California. And that means that California is a sufficient grounding for that law. Now, to be honest, you may have to have your tag on your car in every state, but every state says you got to register your car. So it turns out registration is a national issue. It may not be that way in every country, but it's true for all Americans. And that's why the American law system is sufficient to justify that law.
Again, the organization itself does not justify the law. And The Founding Fathers could have written literally anything they felt like, and it would have been valid by definition because the law is grounded in them and they wrote it. The fact that they spent endless hours of debate agonizing over how to frame the Constitution shows this was not the case. The law was not grounded in them or their will. It was a tool that had to help everybody coexist by balancing the rights of the individual with the need for law and order and the good of broader society. Notice what he says each level of government does, from parking laws to tags to vehicle registration. Nothing to do with layers of moral authority. These are different jobs that fall to different levels of government depending on their function. Nothing about Wallace's model of moral hierarchy makes any sense whatsoever.
Well, wait a minute. How about this? Let's get out of the United States for a second. What about on the international level? Let me give you a crazy law. Is it ever okay to use a car bomb in your car?
Okay, here he's going to use car bombing as an example of a universal principle of right and wrong that transcends national boundaries. I'm going to let him run with it for a while, but as he does, watch how he tackles the question. Does he go up a chain of authorities to decide what people dictate about car bombing? Does he delve into the consequences of the act and decide whether it causes unjustified harm or disruptions? Watch and see.
I think, well, could you argue this? I think that the United Nations would say this is true for everyone, but some people in the group of the United Nations would say, no, actually, we think that we are unjustly being treated. We can actually save more lives by killing a few with a car bomb. We think we're justified in this regard. So we would say not necessarily. Not necessarily true for everyone. So it seems like, this is where the law stops, really at the United Nations level. Can you think of any laws that transcend the United Nations? I mean, they're already starting to argue about this law at the United Nations. Actually, I think we can. Is it ever okay to use a car bomb just for the fun of it? Would any nation say that was okay? Well, no. Once you take out some kind of a justification, you say for the fun of it, now we all agree. This is a law that transcends every nation, everywhere on the planet at any time in history. It's not just the car bomb law. It's never been okay to torture someone for the fun of it. To steal for the fun of it. Do you see, if you just add for the fun of it, at the end you're going to find a set of universal, transcendent, objective laws that transcend every nation. They're not made here. They're not made here. They're not made here. As a matter of fact, even if it's just Jesse, they apply to Jesse. But if we're in a Star Trek universe in which there's a confederation of planets, they would also apply to the Klingons and the Romulans. They actually transcend species. They transcend the planet. Where do these kinds of transcendent laws come from? Oh, that's the problem. They're in this outer ring. But what's that outer ring? We know one thing for sure. All moral laws are about personal obligations. Did you know that? Think about it. I am not personally morally obligated to my police vehicle. And I am not personally morally obligated to my flashlight. And I am not morally obligated to the laws of physics either. You are not morally obligated to inanimate forces. You are only morally obligated to persons like your partner or like the people in your city.
Remember what I said about Wallace stepping on his own toes by getting too close to articulating the real reasons for morality? He's just tripping all over himself, bumbling his way within an inch of actually explaining what morality is before, spoiler alert, he stops himself short and runs to a "it must be God" explanation. But in the process, he gives little hints that he actually has a latent understanding of what he's talking about. Morality is about obligation. Obligation not to police cars or flashlights, but to people. So if morality is about obligation, and we can have obligation to people, why is the mere existence of other people not sufficient grounds for morality? Well, if I and my family were the only people in the world, should I be able to stab one of my children to death? No. Basic inherent reason I should not is because of my obligation to that child not to cause pain or end his life without justification. This obligation exists whether or not there is a city or state or federal government higher above us, because those entities are not necessary to create the already existing obligation for me not to stab my child. It's this existing understanding of our obligation not to stab children, among many other things we shouldn't do, of course, that informs our expectations of what kind of laws the government should pass. levels on the hierarchy exist to do a job, which is to enforce a basic expectation that we already have for how people should be treated, and to create more complex systems of codes and ordinances when questions of how large numbers of people live together get complicated. The question of car bombing came up. Nobody appealed to the authority of the UN itself. They all started asking questions about our obligation to other people. It seems to violate this obligation by allowing for brutal, unpredictable murders. Justifications had to do with whether bombing one person, I'd assume a dangerous or evil person, might save other lives. The only way Wallace gets around these complexities to arrive at a universal moral code is by adding just for fun. What does just for fun do to the question? Inform us of what a higher authority wants? It provides us clarity on the fact that the harm done to one person does not ultimately help other people. Working up the chain to show us what someone up here wants, it digs to the bottom of moral dilemmas to show us how we should behave toward any other person we coexist with. That's the nature of moral debate.
That means we're looking for something at each level that is personal. Whatever it is that transcends the outer ring, it cannot be an impersonal force of physics because you would not be morally obligated to that. I'm looking for a transcendent person to whom I am morally obligated. See the problem?
Why does the entity up here to have moral obligations? The obligation of the personal entities around us not sufficient. Personal being here didn't exist when we stopped caring about other personal beings? As I've been saying, the higher levels of authority do not create obligation. They enforce obligations we already have. Just as we consider it wrong to stab children to death whether or not there's a government above us, we should consider it wrong whether or not there's a God above us. Really basic stuff. And if you need a God to tell you stabbing a child is wrong, or you would start stabbing children once a God told you it was right, something is extremely wrong with you. The fundamental issue here is that Wallace notices we need a grounding or a rationale for moral principles, but he goes about looking for it in the most childish way possible. Questions like, who says or who's in charge? He thinks, or pretends to think, that the only ultimate reason we should follow a rule is that someone in charge said so. He'll endlessly keep looking for the next person who was in charge of the last person, because he's developed just enough adult awareness of the situation to recognize that one person's not a sufficient grounding for morality, but he remains stunted enough that he can only think to resolve this problem by looking for the next authority figure. Each next authority figure has the same logical problem as the last, so his mind short circuits until he puts it at ease by imagining there must be an infinite authority figure who's in charge of everything. Bam! Problem solved. Wrong. Because to actually understand morality, the question we must ask ourselves, and do ask ourselves deep down, if not explicitly, is not who's the next person in charge of this person, but what's the reason for this person's rules? What do the rules serve? Do they make life better for a group of conscious beings? Do they order and help people coexist? Authority figure on these lower levels makes a rule that successfully does one of these things, people will generally accept it. Form of that rule that can do better, they will debate the issue and refine their policies, rules, or laws until they come up with something better. A higher level of authority does not define the validity of these laws. Instead, a city would refine its parking laws not by discussing how well they serve the needs of the community, but by finding out what the state or federal government prefers. Because after all, that's the higher authority the laws are grounded in, right? Of course wrong. The whole model for why we have rules and morals is just stupid. Authorities don't define morals. The authorities that are higher up on this chain just create laws on a different level for different purposes to promote the coexistence of larger, more diverse populations. And even their laws must be justified by how well they help us live together in peace and create a just, humane experience for as many people as possible. If the government passed a law saying we should stab our kids to death, we'd tell them to go f*** themselves, because we recognize where our actual obligations lie. In fact, if God himself told people to stab kids to death, we'd respond in the same way for the same reason. As for many fundamentalists, who would try to justify that law in terms of time, context, and broader purpose. After they recognized that that justification had to be made for their God, tell us that he has to conform to their pre-existing sense of morality instead of dictating it. Enough about the fact that he does.
Bum 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 bum.
This program was made possible by a grant from S.R. Foxley, Bob Generic, Nim Morris, Connor Emsley, Susan Schindler-Loreto, and Q, by the generous support of viewers like you. If you'd like to join them in pledging to this channel, please find a link to the Prophet of Zod Patreon below.
Bum 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 bum.
Good afternoon. This program was made possible by a grant from S.R. Foxley and Q, and by the generous support of viewers like you. If you wish to join them in pledging to this channel, please find a link to the Prophet of Zod Patreon below. I apologize for having skipped so many videos recently, but a couple weeks of illness and a short vacation kind of threw me off schedule. It was all temporary though, and we should now be seeing weekly videos coming out a lot more consistently. I'm going to be responding to a video called Abusing the God of the Gaps Fallacy, made by an apologetic YouTuber named Inspiring Philosophy, which it turns out is a very ironic name, and as you might have guessed by the title, the whole thing is just a long, tedious exercise in splitting. Well, instead of telling you, I think I'll show you. What this video does is repeatedly take hairs, like this one, and makes a painstaking yet pointless effort to split them right down the... Ow, mother! First off, I want to thank Grande Geule 007 for suggesting this video. Rest of you ever have suggestions for videos I can respond to, always feel free to grab my attention, on Twitter ideally, and I'll see if I can get to it. With that, let's get this bolt rolling.
It seems a common reply to the arguments from natural theology is to cry God of the gaps.
Okay, I'm sorry to jump in so early, and I don't want to be nitpicky, but come on. Why crying God of the gaps? Sounds amateur and sets off red flags when a person characterizes the other side as crying their argument. There's full reason for this wording, and when it's applied to a dispassionately analytical practice like pointing out a God of the gaps fallacy, I have every reason to suspect it was just kind of tossed in as a childish low blow. Maybe the point is to insinuate that skeptics just shout out the phrase as a thoughtless knee-jerk reaction? Or I guess maybe sit around like, God of the gaps. But come on, dude. Already, try to be better than this.
In my experience, a skeptic of theism will often use this as a last resort argument.
Last resort? I've seen any pattern of this argument being employed as a last resort. In my experience, skeptics generally point out a God of the gaps fallacy whenever they... Christians use a God of the gaps fallacy. So maybe I could turn the table and suggest that if atheists bring up the phrase late in conversation, it's only because Christians are the ones using the fallacy as a last resort. These kind of accusations are anecdotal and pointless, and we're all better off analyzing our arguments instead of making juvenile preemptive attempts to characterize our opposition. But what's that? I accused this video of splitting hairs before it even started? And that was juvenile too? But I was pointing out a tendency within this video that I'm eventually going to back up with analysis, not just making a broad, baseless jab to characterize all Christians to my audience.
The argument tends to go like, all you have done is found something not explained by science and filled it with God. It is not a real explanation, and one day science will account for this without God, like we have done in the past with several things like lightning and earthquakes. Ancient people used to think these things were caused by gods, and present-day arguments for God's existence are exactly the same.
Wow, he actually took a break from shitting on the skeptic position long enough to more or less accurately set it up for this video. Impressed. It's sad that I have to be impressed by so little, but given what we've seen so far, I kind of am.
The problem with this line of reasoning is that it's an abuse of how the actual fallacy was supposed to be used, and it is based on a misunderstanding of history. First, the God of the Gaps fallacy was actually created by a Christian evangelist named Henry Drummond, and it was never meant to apply to metaphysical theories. The phrase was meant to be used when one inserts divine intervention into a biological process or a physical process.
Two things here. First off, I don't care who identified this fallacy or how it was originally defined. That's simply not relevant to anything, because the problem with this argument is not that it falls under a formally named category. The problem is that it's a fallacious argument, and we determine whether it's fallacious through ongoing analysis and conversation. Language is a fluid thing, so if a demonstrably poor apologetics argument can reasonably be described by the phrase God of the Gaps, then Christians don't get a pass on using it just because one of their own first called dibs on the name. Second, let's keep our eye on this distinction between applying this fallacy to metaphysical theories versus biological or physical processes. I have a feeling that these are artificially distinguished categories, and that any attempt at using a metaphysical theory to prove God will be built on unexplained physical observations. Let's watch and see.
For example, we can't explain how elephants evolved from primitive mammals, therefore it was miraculous. We can't explain the order of certain orbital levels of electrons, therefore it is run by divine intervention. We can't explain how fish evolved into tetrapods, therefore divine intervention happened. However, Drummond encouraged his fellow Christians to accept all of nature as the product of God's work. In other words, the intricacies of natural processes, still unanswered by science, don't need divine intervention inserted into them. But all of nature itself still implies the existence of a creator who set natural processes into motion.
So let me get this straight. According to you, if you claim that a physical process needs to be explained by a current miracle that occurs within that process, that's God of the Gaps. If you claim that the same physical process, or the culmination of all physical processes, must be explained by God miraculously setting the universe into motion, that's not God of the Gaps. Seriously? That's what you're going for? Most common usage, the God of the Gaps fallacy, refers to the practice of pointing to gaps in our current knowledge and saying God is needed to explain them. The mechanism of how or when you say God did it doesn't matter. To illustrate, let's say we see a domino fall but don't know why. The person says, wow, we don't know what made that domino fall. That must mean God pushed it over. The person says, well, no, I don't think God pushed that specific domino over, but he obviously must have pushed the original domino that set off the chain reaction and knocked this one over. These people are doing the same thing. They're looking at a mystery and coming up with the same premature, totally unjustified explanation that God did it. The difference is that one of them feels a little more sophisticated because he pushed that explanation a little further back in time and explained a series of natural events between the observed event and his appeal to the supernatural. Come on, we all know these are just different forms of the same thought process. Can you see why I opened this video with an illustration about splitting hairs? Dumb asshole made me cut my finger with his stupid argument.
Inserting God into a natural process is not how most arguments for God's existence function. See, arguments for God's existence are philosophical in nature. We take scientific data and infer a philosophical or metaphysical theory that we believe best fits with the data.
In other words, God didn't push the current domino. We just looked at all the dominoes that fell and assumed he must have pushed the first one. That's what this is saying, and labeling it as metaphysical or philosophical doesn't do shit to change the fact.
For example, materialism is a metaphysical theory of reality. not a scientific theory.
I have a feeling he's going to base a lot of this video on conflating philosophical naturalism with methodological naturalism. How this video goes yet, at the time of writing, not recording of course, but I'm willing to bet money on it.
Materialism is the idea all that exists is matter, and the complex arrangements of matter. This cannot be proven by science, only inferred philosophically.
So what he's saying here sounds true, and in a way it might kind of be true. But his definition of materialism pushes the boundaries of language in a way that allows for certain abuses. Like inspiring philosophy is going to build most of his arguments on these abuses. Now this strategy of slipping linguistic nuance under the radar is one of apologists' favorite sleight of hand tricks. And when they try to take us off the rails like this, I think one of the easiest ways to cut through the crap and maintain clarity is with a visual aid. So here is one. The area inside this circle represents everything we currently know. Basically what we've managed to figure out and can currently demonstrate about the physical universe, while the area outside the circle includes totally unobserved and currently unobservable things, such as the beginning of the universe, what might be outside the universe, and so on. Anything we can prove to anybody else lies within the circle, and by contrast, any claim we make about what's outside the circle is totally silly because it's made up and you can't prove a word of it to anyone. The problem is that claims about God, including God of the Gaps arguments, which pay lip service to flimsy lines of logic, are all attempts to fill in this outside circle with guesses. And since inspiring philosophy can't prove about his own baseless guess, he's doing the next best thing, which is to claim that materialism just makes the equally baseless guess that everything outside the circle is physical matter. Basically, well yeah, I can't prove my thing, but you can't prove your thing either, so we're all on equal footing because everybody has to make some kind of guess. But his attempt at dragging materialism down to his level involves a subtle little trick, which is using the term materialism to cover a conflation of philosophical naturalism and methodological naturalism. Philosophical naturalism is, roughly speaking, the idea that all that exists is natural. The extent that this is claimed with 100% certainty, it is making a guess about what's outside the circle. It's leagues ahead of theism in terms of the quality of the guess, but technically it still is a guess. Methodological naturalism, however, makes no guess whatsoever. Instead, it just takes the only intelligent approach to the area outside the circle, which is to say, hey, what's out there? So let's work with what we do know, which is this area in here. We can possibly change our minds as we discover new things outside the circle, but let's get there slowly based on actual evidence. Inspiring philosophy doesn't allow this position, for good reason. By lumping all non-theistic stances with philosophical naturalism, and perhaps exaggerating the certainty of philosophical naturalism, philosophy is creating a false dilemma between two different ways of jumping the gun, all in a sloppy attempt to help Christians feel less silly for guessing God exists. A little trick, but he's going to get a lot of mileage out of it in ways you can probably guess.
If a materialist was to argue that from something we observe in science was evidence in favor of materialism, it would be absurd for me to reply that they are just trying to explain that with the materialism of the gaps. And that is how ridiculous it sounds when a non-theist attempts to argue a God of the gaps in response to the arguments from natural theology or the metaphysical theory of theism.
Absolutely not. The very idea of materialism of the gaps is just nonsense. And already we see inspiring philosophy rush to cash in on his previous efforts to confuse materialism and philosophical naturalism. Out of the gaps arguments are problematic because, when faced with a mystery about how the universe works, they jump the gun and import purely guessed-at information from out here. But materialism never does any such thing. It wants us to think not only that materialism assumes everything outside our realm of observation is physical, but that it draws on this assumption to explain things it can't within the universe, like theists do when they import assumptions about God. Silly. First off, because even philosophical naturalism just assumes everything operates by the same rules as the natural universe, an assumption that provides no supernatural nonsense to fill gaps with anyway, and just encourages actual scientific inquiry. Second, remember that this is a moot point anyway, because methodological naturalism does not make assumptions about anything outside the universe. Inspiring philosophy is basically just dipping into an age-old attempt to equate not importing assumptions about God with importing assumptions that there is no God.
Theists are not actually arguing from a gap in a natural process, but arguing for a metaphysical theory of reality, which attempts to explain why there are natural processes, or what is the best way to explain reality. Metaphysical theories attempt to explain all of reality and what reality is. When a theist argues God exists from arguments used in natural theology, one is not arguing from a gap in our knowledge with regards to how natural processes work, but arguing a whole scientific process or certain data infers a theistic worldview. That is by definition not arguing from a gap, but arguing our full understanding of science infers a theistic worldview.
We've already been over this. Basically, he's just saying God pushed a domino way up the chain instead of a domino we're looking at, and then claims this makes him less superstitious. Picture of a tipped over cup filled with stars doesn't make this more impressive.
For example, cosmological arguments do not argue for a gap in the evolution of the universe, but they argue the universe, as a whole, has a necessary and sentient cause.
In other words, there are current gaps in our knowledge that can only be explained by God at the beginning of the universe. But this isn't God of the gaps.
Teleological arguments do not argue from gaps within physical processes, but argues the fine-tuning of the universe, as a whole, leads to design.
In other words, there are current gaps in our understanding of why the universe is apparently fine-tuned that can only be explained by God tuning it. But of course, this isn't God of the gaps.
Saying these and other similar arguments, or arguing from gaps, would be as absurd as saying the theory of gravity is a gap filler until we find a better explanation. The theory of gravity, which almost everyone accepts, is the best way to explain certain observable phenomena. We have observed data in physical reality and came up with a theory of gravity to best explain this data. It would be absurd for someone, like a flat earther, to say gravity is just a gap filler, and that we can't explain why objects fall to the earth, so we have just inserted our made-up theory of gravity into this process. A logical person would just respond that gravity is simply the best explanation of observable data. If one day we find a better explanation, then it will replace gravity, but currently it is not just a gap filler. And when theists argue that all of reality is best explained by theism, we are not arguing from a gap in our knowledge with regards to physical or biological processes. We are arguing like one argues from the evidence for the theory of gravity.
Okay, do I really need to explain this to you? Do I need to explain that the theory of gravity is not an unobserved thing comprised of random traits that people just made up? To explain that it's a parsimonious model for summing up phenomena we've actually observed and does not rely on importing any random guesses about what lies outside the universe? That it's subject to constant revision as we make new observations? In contrast, do I need to catalog all the assumptions about God that theists simply make up based on sheer guesses about the existence and nature of a being nobody's ever seen? To point out that this being was not observed, as gravity is, was not studied, as gravity is, cannot be repeatedly demonstrated, as gravity is. Do I need to explain that if scientists invoke gravity the way theistic philosophers invoke God, then upon seeing things fall, they'd forgo rigorous scientific investigation and just say, well, obviously the gravity monster loves us and doesn't want us to fly up into space, so it gently holds us on the ground to protect us. And by the way, the gravity monster happens to be what I learned about in Sunday school. Because I've already spent way too long asking rhetorical questions about this, and I'm tired of talking about it now. Get the difference between a tentative but solid theory built on observations and using the supernatural to explain things that mystify you, you're probably trying to be obtuse.
So, we should note science is not burying theism. The best arguments for God's existence have come about from modern advancements in science from within the past 100 years.
So basically, people have made more sophisticated arguments for God as our population became more educated and religion had to contend with more complex scientific realities. This is exactly what we would expect in a godless universe. But if God existed, I wonder why he would have let all these arguments sit dormant for thousands of years while unconvinced people went to hell for lack of access to them.
So the current arguments for God's existence don't compare to ancient beliefs in natural gods that cause lightning or earthquakes. The more science reveals, the more evidence we have for God's existence, as I've argued in past videos. When non-theists try to use the God of the gaps argument in response to natural theology, in reality, they only shoot themselves in the foot. First, Saying evidence which implies theism will be overturned by people in the future is nothing more than arguing a future humans of the gaps argument. One is essentially saying, I don't know the answer to this, but I know more intelligent people in the future will have an answer, and I know it will fit my worldview of non-theism. Instead of offering a better explanation of the data to counter theism, one has filled a gap in their worldview with the unknown knowledge of future humans. You don't know what the future will bring, so you just can't assume more intelligent individuals in the future will find an explanation that is better than a theistic one. This is just an attempt to ignore a clear problem for a non-theistic worldview and hoping and believing it will one day go away.
Non-theists don't depend on future people filling gaps in our knowledge. And the fact that you think we do betrays a weakness in your own thinking. You have an ancient superstitious discomfort with the idea of unanswered questions. You think they need to be answered by something, that there's something inherently unresolved, even unnatural, with us not having answers. This is so foundational to your approach to the world that you think everybody, including us,
Alright, it's motherfucking Sunday. A snowy Sunday. It look like it's stopping a little bit. Oh no, it's still snowing. Not that bitch. Damn. Another snowy ass Sunday. Me and my girl had planned on going somewhere, but I ain't gonna lie, yo. I don't wanna go out in the snow. You guys got any plans for the day? What do you plan on getting into? I think this lighter is dry. I actually might take a little break, go play some video games. I was gonna play games yesterday and didn't get around to it, yeah. Damn. What?
I came in here.
Y'all be getting hella fucking. So I don't know when we were trying to. Well, when I was trying to buy a PS5, Matthew sent me a message on Telegram. So I downloaded the Telegram app just because Matthew sent me some shit through there. But now I get like all kind of like notifications from that shit. Yeah.
Special ed art?
Oh, that was a while ago. He just said that one or two things left out.
Killer gunk. That's why I go look up people's page so I can roast them. I just made dinner / lunch. So it's done. I need a 3.5.
Hmm?
I need a 3.5. I know. You don't gotta say it out loud. I'm obsessed with Clubhouse, but only when I'm like doing something. If I'm just sitting here listening, it's kind of like. But if I'm moving around and it gives me something to listen to, it's cool.
Like a podcast. If you want to say something, you can. That's like Joe Rogan show. I love listening to Joe Rogan. Sometimes I wish I could just like pop in and be like, yo, take this right here, Joe Rogan.
Yeah, it was cool. Like I talked for a good while and we just had good conversation. Like, and like I said, some of the people are in the cannabis industry. A couple of the people make music, but now we started this group called the Futurists. So everybody has their own little thing, and then, like they seem like they meet up every day, but they're like, we do once a week. So I'm like, okay, I could do that once a week. Just pop in. Because they talk about some real good shit.
Mm-hmm.
And like the guy who I told you who does the American Idol, they were just saying that he was in a Beyonce video, and I'm like, you're lying. This motherfucker was in a Bugaboo video.
Oh, yeah.
So that shit was like, you just never know. There's been a lot of, people who were famous that aren't necessarily in the game anymore, but they still have, advice, so. Because I doubt a Beyonce is just going to pop up in there. She don't got time for that type of shit. But, like, the other day I got to hear just Blaze talk, and that was cool. Briefly. I can't believe it's really fucking snowing and shit ruined my plans. And I bet everybody's out at the store right now.
Yo, can y'all please pick some people in here? Alright, bet. I picked all 2 people that I can, you know what I'm saying? I picked 2 people literally. It's too much fucking pigs. Like, nigga, it's too many.
Oh, man.
Probably because I was picking OD before I left that last room.
Tell us what you talking about.
Yo, who's in here right now? Booze, you still here?
Somebody bring up everybody. I'm about to put y'all onto this shit. I really shouldn't be putting y'all onto this shit, but I'm gonna put y'all on anyway.
Look at it. I was hoping D1 would come in. I'm almost to a point where I gotta set this canvas back down again because I already covered it. But the background, really, I think.
It looks good though. That's better to me.
Yeah, I think the foreground is basically done, yo. But I'm gonna let the background dry and go over the background one more time and add like some little lights and more highlights in the back.
You did a damn good job though, babe, because that shit was hard.
Yeah, like, I don't know. And that's why somebody seeing me taking this picture is like, oh, special ed art cringe. It's like, yeah, well, I can.
Yeah, bro, you recreated that.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not listening to you do whatever.
But it looks pretty good. It looks just like that. That's the thing. I try to do it just like the photo, so it looks just like the photo.
Right. People are just dumb. Like, dude, then you come recreate this photo where you cannot see anything in the background.
What? Almost done with it. Like I said, this
And
was...
you were like skeptical and hesitant, and you told him like, yo,
oh, and I already like
several times, but like he likes the picture. I get it because it's like one of those monumental, like, you know.
And he wants to own a piece of my art, and I get that. But anybody else, I would never ever have accepted this job. Yo. I just wouldn't have took it. With this photo, I was like, nah, it's too hard, bro. I'm not.
Even if it was me, you would have been like, babe,
No.
choose a different picture.
Yeah, no.
So D1, if you listening, that was love.
Yeah, that's all the way love, bro. Cause it's a struggle. And people looking at that shit like, ew, cringe. Like, calm down. But almost to a good stopping point for the day with this piece. If I can, I really just want to like play with this shirt here and then play with his shirt right there, and then I'll have to set this back down for a couple days. I'm gonna try to pull up my next commission, and I'm trying to work as much as I can because I really need to work on my own shit. Yo, I got like 4 paintings I need to work on for myself still. I mean, I started prepped out like a couple months ago. I ain't even touched that bitch since. I'm barely halfway through with the second layer for Glenda's painting. I ain't touched your feet yet. Like, I gotta do more work. I gotta spend more time in the studio.
Shit, not even that. You do a lot of work. You just have commissions to do that. So.
I'll share it with you. I think that if we don't have God to answer our questions, we must be holding oh so desperately onto a hope that future humans will. Between us and you is not that we find a different way to fill all these gaps. And it's not that we need future humans to possess this knowledge the way you need God to possess it. It is that we're perfectly comfortable with unanswered questions. We don't hope they'll go away, as you say, because we don't need them to. We think they're part of life. Many of us, me included, think there will be many questions humans will just never answer. Our I don't knows be I don't knows and study actual things we can learn instead of jumping to unfounded conclusions. That you don't seem to recognize this about us leads me to wonder whether you're more confused than manipulative.
One does not really provide an answer, but just assumes their worldview is already correct, on blind faith, and places their faith in future humans to confirm what they want to be true. Second, notice what they have admitted without realizing it. They have not explained how materialism, or other non-theistic views, can account for these pieces of data, but admitted these are gaps in the materialism.
Somebody
or
told me this,
naturalistic
that
view of
if
reality.
something happens to your outer box,
Non-theistic views
that they'll actually
cannot fully
replace it
explain
for
the
free,
data that
and they
theists
don't
have
ask for like any
and they
receipt
only
or
openly
warranty or
explain the
anything.
future.
So all we have to do is pay
So
for
to say
shipping,
these arguments
and they'll send me a
are
replacement for my
arguments,
OtterBox.
Yeah, well, how do you prove that you bought an OtterBox if
They don't make you prove it.
Well, just go to OtterBox.com and say.
Babe, I'm on the website right now.
Oh
That's what I'm
damn.
saying. Somebody told me, and I wanted to check it out first, but they really didn't ask for anything. They just asked where I bought it from, and then like what store specifically.
Well,
It said a Walmart. It didn't ask, but it didn't say like what Walmart. You know what I mean?
Sprint said that with my screen protector. They was like, you don't need no receipt or nothing. Just call them and tell them like, yo, I need a new screen protector. I broke my shit or whatever. And you just pay for shipping.
It's a better explanation of reality if they cannot account for this data through a materialistic worldview, or offer a better and more parsimonious explanation.
Oh, look
Here
at
he
that!
claims to not jump to conclusions and boasts in the fact that he does.
See, baby, see how much save you some money.
When a non-theist cries God of the
He's about to charge us
they are
$60
not
for
really
something that
addressing
wasn't an
the
OtterBox.
It looked like an OtterBox, just like it. No, look, bro. My shit says OtterBox. That's what I want. And then he know he didn't have it and went to his shelf and looking like. Oh, sorry, buddy.
I don't know what one is the best one to get. Is it just the difference in design?
history.
Yeah, all of them are just.
I mean, one of them has a little clip holder. I don't want the little clip because I feel like that'll snap.
No, it's OtterBox. That shit won't break.
No issue for our
I still got my clip holders. These shit don't break.
Yeah, you got the little poppy thing. See that? I don't mind it, but like I'd rather buy one that I could just pull off when I don't want it anymore or change them out. Like I don't really like that thing.
Yeah, and if you have that, it's hard to put a clip holder on it.
That's what I'm saying. So I'd rather have the clip, but I don't want to get it if it's gonna break. So I'd rather just have nothing. Just get the regular case.
And there are clear gaps they cannot account for within their framework.
They have a clear
Yes,
one?
I've noticed it too.
A clear
I've
OtterBox?
already shown this exact same graphic before, which gives us the chance to notice that the
No,
left
my phone
column
is
says,
ugly right now. I gotta
"Explain
get my
further."
fix first.
Well, the right column says,
Oh
"Do
my
not know."
god.
Interesting trick of wording, and it leads you to wonder, comparing what theists can explain to what non-theists actually know. It's a tacit admission that theists don't know anything they claim. Non-theists could explain all these things if they were equally content just to make it up. Seriously, it's like there were two guys exploring a cave. Takes a flashlight and slowly, methodically walks around while mapping out what he sees. Just sits where he is and randomly draws caverns and passages, then brags because his map has more information.
Damn, they won't let me get a black one?
So in
I mean,
reality,
a different
crying
color one?
God
Gotta be
gaps
black?
in response to natural theology only creates more problems for the non-theist than it solves.
Or so it would appear if you don't understand the concepts of methodological naturalism, the God of the gaps fallacy, the scientific method, or anything else. And if you have your head shoved so far up the of your own religion that you can't pull it back out. Hear why this guy calls himself inspiring philosophy. It's supposed to be the love of wisdom, not
Damn.
But they don't make it easy though, because their website is some shit.
Well, a couple of quick things before we get started. First, if you actually want to see me twice this week, you can head over to Pelagia's channel, where I joined him in critiquing William Lane Craig's attempts at justifying the problems of suffering and evil. If you haven't heard Pelagia yet, which you should have by the time you're here, make sure to browse his channel and subscribe. Seriously, one of the best atheist channels out there, so you're missing out if you haven't seen it yet. I've had a sore throat and some congestion for a while, so I'm sorry if I don't sound quite like myself. I've missed enough videos due to the sore season, but I wanted to make sure to power through and get one out for you. So join me as I have a look at a video called 7 Incredible Bible Facts That Will Blow Your Mind.
The Bible has been burned, it's been banned, it's been belittled and attacked, but it's still here.
I bet that one wasn't burned, banned, belittled, or attacked. You silly goose.
Can you trust it? How can you know these ancient words are true? You can't.
Won't stop you from patronizing your audience of people who already believe it's true by reiterating canned, age-old assurances in brand new ways. All the while gazing straight into our souls with those amazing, piercing blue eyes.
Oh, they have more options.
Huh, that wasn't bad either. Gets you all amped up for something high energy like the Avengers. You have to go and dork it up with something like a flying prophecy line. Get me wrong, flying prophecy lines aren't terrible, I guess. If, you think that kind of thing isn't stupid because you're a Christian. But there are a lot of non-terrible things that are perfectly fine by themselves, but simply shouldn't be accompanied by rousing music. So yeah, a little hint. Guy talking about the Bible, don't blast us with a turgid soundtrack that suggests a team of superheroes is about to burst onto the screen. Christ isn't doing you any favors.
Hi, this is Dustin with Hope Through Prophecy. Today, we will consider 7 undeniable facts about the Bible.
I bet you I'll be able to deny a few of them. So, yeah, looks like he's going to keep up the music thing, so...
Fact 1. The Bible is the best-selling book in human history. It is translated into 670 languages, with the New Testament of the Bible being translated into over 1,500 languages. The Bible is the highest-selling, most-read book on the planet, and no other book comes close. Statistica.com.
Man, this is from the Otterbox brand, but this don't look as sturdy. Or is it just because it's clear? It's all in my head.
Estimates that this number has grown to over 5 billion.
Yeah, the clear doesn't look like it has the second part to it.
I mean, it goes all the way around, but it doesn't look like. I mean, it'll protect the sides of it. And I guess if I get a screen protector, essentially it won't matter. I really like that phone case. It was perfect.
Baby girl, we are back at it. Let's go. This is gonna be like nothing we've ever seen before.
Are you ready to see your fixer-upper? Fixer-upper, welcome home. Only on Discovery Plus.
According to the Bible, God is the true author of this best-selling book. All scripture is given by inspiration of God.
So if you watch closely, you'll notice this guy did something really weird during this segment. Spent pretty much all of point number 1 talking about how many copies of the Bible have been sold. Makes sense, because that's what this part was about. What he does at the end.
According to the Bible, God is the true author of this best-selling book.
According to the Bible, the book was written by the guy who said he wrote the book.
Oh, it was that easy?
Statement is not at all related to the numbers of copies the Bible is sold. It doesn't prove anything. This comes off as an embarrassingly obvious sign that he's just pandering to a pre-existing Christian who's already standing slack-jawed awe not only of his beautiful eyes, but of the Bible. What are the Bible sales supposed to mean anyway? If he's supposed to hear these stats and be like, well, me sideways, are you serious? The holy book of the world's dominant religion sold more copies than anything else? This fact is mundane to the point of being boring even at a glance. And that's before we even scratch the surface of the larger historical context behind this stat. Christian history, the church was the main, if not only, producer and preserver of written documents. And books other than the Bible went uncopied, if not suppressed or destroyed. Even going back 100 to 200 years,
It's only $6.99 for shipping too.
Not to mention the
It's not bad at all. A phone case for $7. I'll take it.
A $60 phone case for $7.
Hell yeah. I know this one costs some money because it's like a gradient. It's like a quote unquote cute phone case. The ones that are pretty always cost more. The black ones are always the cheapest. King Hazy said, Prince and Princess, peace up.
Yo, what up, King?
Fact 2. The Bible has survived the attacks of men. Throughout the dark ages of history, the truth of the Bible was covered in darkness.
Whose fault is that? It's not Christian.
The Bible has been banned. The decree of the Council of Townhouse, made by the apostate church of that day, reads, we prohibit also that the laity should be permitted to have the books of the Old or New Testament. We most strictly forbid their having any translation of these books. The Bible has been burned. According to the ruling of the Council of Arizona of AD 1234, no one may possess...
So that's the second layer for this piece right here. I'm gonna let it dry for another couple days and go back over the background again. I was really like iffy on what to do with the background, but I just tried to recreate it from the photograph as best as possible.
I mean, he's trying to create this dramatic narrative.
And so, yeah, it didn't do too bad.
Freeze were not about trying to eliminate the Bible.
Let's say I'm gonna darken it up a little bit because the background I put on before was too light, and that's once again, if you go light and then try to go dark, it's really hard because you can still see the light colors through the dark paint. That's why you always go dark and then lighten up as you go, so you don't have this effect. And so now I have to use more paint and more paint to cover up the light paint. That's just how oil paints work, yo. It's always better if you go dark first. So like I said, I'll just let it dry for a couple days and come back and darken up the background again. Add some little highlights because there's a light here and a light back there, and straighten up the lines on this guy's shirt here, and that'll be another project wrapped up.
My great grandparents just went to the store and bought the Bible that sits on my desk, or rather the dresser. They just kind of physically kept it in their house. I actually treasure this Bible as a family keepsake and love the people who pass it down to me. It's just the right size and store sound Bible in a cardboard box. Anyway, I guess he wasn't specifically talking about my Bible, but hopefully my story can help talk Christians down from their hysteria by reminding them that they can go buy and carry around Bibles all they want.
John Wycliffe, nicknamed the Morning Star of the Reformation, was the first to translate the Bible into the English language. As a reward for this great act, Wycliffe's bones were exhumed and publicly burned, and the ashes
The ashes were thrown into the Swift River. The Bible is deadly and gruesome. Shit crazy. Who got their bones thrown into the Swift River?
John Wycliffe's bones aren't the Bible. Yet this is kind of connected to suppressing
Calm down a little bit.
forms of the Bible. It feels like this guy's just clumsily tossing in ancient factoids that he knows will get a rise out of.
He says, keep your old outer box just in case. Like, I wish they would call me and be like, oh yeah, we know you paid all this money and your thing broke, but we need you to send the old one back. I'm gonna be like, first of all,
I've been through that shit out.
right, been through that shit out. Of course I don't have a receipt for something I bought in May, but clearly if you go on Walmart's website, they sell this outer box as well as Sam's Club. My cousin got it from Sam's Club, got mine from Walmart. I know they're not gonna call though, because somebody told me about that shit and I was just like, what? And they were like, yeah, they're not gonna call you.
said 100 years from today, the Bible will be.
I don't know how long it's gonna take.
Ironically, 100 years after his death, Voltaire's own home site was used to distribute Bibles for the French Bible Society.
Okay, now this is interesting.
And they better give me my $7 back too if they don't.
And Christians can all laugh because, the Bible didn't go away like we said it would, and copies were even distributed in his hometown. You all notice that even in the examples
Oh damn, oh damn.
Christians were the ones passing
Yep, that shit is still really wet.
killing each other and burning each other.
Let's see. Your warranty order has been received. Our distribution orders will pack and ship your replacement as quickly as possible. We'll send you a shipping confirmation with a tracking number as soon as your order has begun its journey to your doorstep. Please note that we are experiencing delays.
John 10:35 clearly states, the scripture cannot be broken. The Bible has been preserved over time. The Bible's New Testament has over 5,800 manuscripts in the original Greek and over 24,000 total manuscripts, far more than any other ancient in the world. The evidence is clear that the Bible has been preserved through the centuries.
The champ?
That is that the Bible is still here.
So right now, actually, everybody has paid me in full for all their art. No, except this piece. That piece is paid in full, and that green. I'm talking about with shipping and everything. The green piece is paid in full with shipping. This piece is paid in full with shipping.
You don't have to pay for shipping.
No, you have to drop his off to him, or you pick it up whenever it drive. But so far, he only got the deposit, the $200 deposit on this.
Just like that.
So that's
We already knew that. Make sure. Did you notice the giant switch of the Catholic? Talking about how the Bible is the Catholic Church, with its isolated attempts to eliminate certain translations, is some monolithic force out to destroy God's Word. We're talking about the number of manuscripts in the Bible. Same Catholic Church.
What about this? I almost looked.
I almost got it, bro.
Almost. Gotta be quicker than that.
Alright, so the next commission for this photograph out. Hey. No, not
Is that a
that
bigger
big
one?
one.
But true science is always in harmony with the Bible. For example, the Bible clearly reveals the shape of the earth as if
And then now that I think about it, I could have edited the color on here a little bit to give it a little more saturation and hue, like just to make them pop out.
that the earth was circular.
Oh, God.
But
Not the one
it
about
is what it is. I hate really doing that, like editing people's photos when they send them to me, just because I know I don't know, it'll look better to me. You know, sometimes it may not look better than the other people, because most of my photos, even when I take a picture of my paintings, I edit it a little bit and like edit the exposure or the contrast a little bit just so it looks better online. But I don't know, like when people give me a picture, I hate to like, let me change this, brighten this and darken this and add this little color. And then they'll look at that shit like, that ain't how they ain't meant. Whatever. My colors don't never come out exact anyway. It ain't about matching the colors exact. It's about the tone of the colors. If you get the tone right, then everything will look right. Hmm? What? You're tired. For what?
I just finished cooking breakfast and then I turned around to cook dinner.
Oh damn! I just asked a question. Then.
Aren't you tired from cooking and washing dishes?
Cooking and washing dishes. Yo, she tired of shit from cooking and washing dishes. I would be
just
too.
woke up.
Cause I would be too. Yeah, I did 75-pound dumbbell press this morning. And I ain't gonna lie, yo, for the longest, I haven't really been doing dumbbell press. I do my bench, and I do incline on the bench, and I'll do dumbbell inclines, and I'll do like 50-pound dumbbells. But I never do like a flat bench dumbbell press. I hardly ever do that shit. I was just on Instagram watching some workout shit. Yo, dude had some big ass fucking shoulders and big ass pecs. But he's like, most of the time when he bench, that's how he do his bench is just dumbbell presses. But he a big ass, like he's doing like 90-pound dumbbells till 2 o'clock.
And that's there, but here is until 5 now.
And well, it's getting warmer though. Cause when I left out this morning, it
but
was
then
29 degrees.
Well, this is my thing. Like, yeah, we could still go, but like, is it gonna be wet? It's outdoors. I'm pretty sure.
I don't want to go if it's outdoors and wet, babe.
That's what I'm saying. But they said a trail, so I'm wondering, is it just going from a location and then driving to the next? Like, I don't really know. I haven't done this before.
And how far is it from here?
45 minutes. 40 for us. It's until 7 p.m. Only says 3 people are going, so a lot of people aren't going because of the weather. But it's free. Let's see. Enjoy your sweet journey. Visit 6 participating wineries and enjoy special wine and chocolate features for a chance to
You're
win.
gonna drive another 50 miles
Trail
between those
goers
6.
it's all right there. Can travel from winery to winery, and we don't have to go to every one. But
if you still want to go, we can go. Just get bundled up. Man.
I think it's inside now. I mean, but they said a trail.
That's what I'm saying. If you go on the trail, that's what I keep thinking. Like we're walking, and then if the wineries are close together, you're gonna just walk from one winery to the other.
Just choose one winery to go to.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. If you want to, it don't matter how it is, babe. If you want to go, we can go.
Fact 5: the Bible has internal consistency.
Let me see how that's going on.
I thought when they said different wineries, like this one and 2 in this county, then you go like to Scranton, and there's 2 or 3 wineries over there, but if they're like, if it's one vineyard and different wineries have their setups on the same vineyard or close to the same vineyard, I can see that because they're talking about trails. So would you go from one side of the vineyard from this winery and walk down there? And then they have their winery down here.
They're saying the participating people, so I mean,
yeah, like if it's close, I don't care. But I don't want to be like you say, driving from city or little township to township if it's snowing like this. It does sound fun though. It's a wine and chocolate. It's a free wine and chocolate tasting thing.
Yeah, and then if you go, you get your ticket stamped, and then you could get entered to win like this basket of like truffles. And
But it's 45 minutes away, and it's fucking snowing already. It's been snowing for a while. Like, it's been snowing for at least 2 hours now.
Wait, was he going to do anything more than just assert the Bible is consistent?
So she says, what's the COVID restrictions? Highlander, you have to visit the 6 participating wineries between February 5th and the 14th to be eligible for the wine basket drawing. COVID rules will regulate how many folks are allowed in each winery at one time. Wineries are allowed to offer 5 tastes to each participant. So, I mean, if that's 6 different wineries, that's up to 30 different teas.
The Encyclopedia of Biblical Prophecy, J. Arthur Payne, states that there are 1,817 prophecies in the Bible, making up about 20.
But a lot of people aren't going to really go. So, I mean, that's the good part that I was excited for, that there won't be a lot of people there.
But, yeah, it's crowded.
Well, maybe if you let other religions literally retaliate their own prophecies, they come up with a lot too. Who cares?
Well, I guess I can type in here and ask them, like, are you going to have tents up, or?
And it makes sense. If someone attempts
Is
to
it
predict the
inside?
future and is wrong, they're instantly discredited.
Unless they're careful to make
Because Tamar said he went to like some little winery thing, and they had tents outside. That was early in the spring.
That's what I'm wondering. I'm sure they're prepared because it's wintertime. I know they're not just going to just have us outside.
And that's what I think where I said, oh, each winery can have, a certain amount of people in at once.
Yep, so that's it. It's until 7 o'clock, so.
Yeah, 7 is already dark and all that shit there.
Yeah, I agree. That's why I cooked dinner early, just in case.
Isn't that stupid thing in Daniel where some guy
Well, if we don't go, we should go now. What time is it?
and then another guy
It's 11:30, babe. But I mean, if you got work to get done, you got work to get done.
Christians like to go back and retroactively connect each situation with the nation that came along afterward, depending on when the book of Daniel was actually written. Usually based on things as stupid as specific instances of those kings using metals that almost everybody used.
Any description cannot be given from
We
next
can go
year.
next time. I said we can go next time.
Known for their dominant
You
army
driving?
and brutal power, Rome has been given the fitting nickname the Iron Monarchy.
Yeah, if you drive back.
This empire described in the New Testament of the Bible.
You want me to drive in the snow? Okay, I'll drive.
Soldiers with Jesus with an iron cat of 9 tails. Drove iron nails into his
No, I mean,
What time it started?
at 10 a.m. We just started. But, I mean, we could just go to another place another time. There's probably some vineyard or something around.
Oh, man. I already been here for 3 hours. I'm gonna take a break anyway, guys. I'll get up with y'all next time. Peace.